The morning Eliza Whitmore discovered her husband had erased her from existence, she stood alone in a room so cold her breath formed clouds. 3 days married. 3 days. And already banished to a crumbling estate at the edge of nowhere, exiled by a man who'd barely looked at her during their vows. No explanation, no apology. Just a carriage, a single trunk, and instructions delivered by a stone-faced servant. His Grace requires you remain here. Not requests, not asks. Requires. Like she was cargo. A problem solved by distance and silence. But here's what the Duke didn't know. What nobody knew. Eliza Whitmore wasn't the kind of woman who disappeared quietly. If you're watching from London, Manchester, or anywhere else where stories of survival hit different, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this journey travels. And hit that like button because this story gets wilder. The Whitmore townhouse in London had always smelled faintly of desperation masked by rosewater, but on the morning of Eliza's wedding, it reeked of pure panic. "Stand still," her mother hissed, yanking the corset laces so hard Eliza's vision spotted. "You'll ruin everything if you faint at the altar." "I'm not going to faint." Eliza's voice came out steadier than she felt. She stared at her reflection in the spotted mirror. Pale skin, dark hair twisted into something resembling elegance, and eyes that looked older than her 22 years. The wedding dress was borrowed. The veil was her grandmother's. Even her shoes belonged to a cousin who'd gotten married the year before to a merchant with kind eyes and gentle hands. Eliza would get no such luck. "The Duke of Blackthorn?" her mother breathed, stepping back to assess her work with the critical eye of a general surveying troops before battle. "Do you understand what this means? What you're saving?" Eliza understood perfectly. Her father had gambled away their estate, their reputation, and very nearly their future. The only thing keeping the Whitmores from complete social annihilation was this marriage, a transaction brokered in desperation and sealed with her life. "He's twice my age," Eliza said quietly. "He's powerful." Her mother's tone turned sharp. "And you'll be a duchess. Do you know how many girls would kill for this opportunity?" Opportunity. The word tasted like ash. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of cold stone and colder vows. Westminster Cathedral was magnificent and utterly empty of warmth. Adrian Blackthorn, Duke of Ravensmore, stood beside her like a marble statue, tall, severe, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes the color of winter ice. He didn't look at her during the vows, didn't even glance her direction when he said, "I do," in a voice devoid of anything resembling emotion. When the priest pronounced them married, Adrian's kiss was so brief and perfunctory that Eliza barely registered the touch of his lips before he'd already turned away. The wedding breakfast was worse, held at Blackthorn House, a massive London mansion that felt more like a mausoleum. It was attended by perhaps 50 people, none of whom seemed particularly happy to be there. Eliza sat at the head table beside her new husband, who spent the entire meal in conversation with the gentleman to his left, discussing parliamentary matters as if she didn't exist. "Your Grace?" she ventured once, softly. Adrian's jaw tightened. He didn't turn, didn't acknowledge her at all, just kept talking about grain tariffs and trade routes while Eliza sat there, a decoration in white silk, slowly realizing what kind of marriage she'd entered. By the time the guests departed, the sun was setting. Eliza waited in what she'd been told was now her sitting room, a cavernous space decorated in shades of gray and darker gray, expecting something, a conversation maybe, an explanation of what came next. At minimum, some acknowledgement that they were now legally bound for life. Instead, a knock came at the door. Not Adrian. A servant, the head butler, Mr. Grimshaw, whose expression suggested he'd been carved from the same granite as his employer. "Her Grace's carriage departs at dawn," he announced. "I've instructed the maids to pack your personal effects." Eliza blinked. "Carriage? I don't understand. Are we traveling?" Something that might have been pity flickered across Grimshaw's weathered face. "His Grace has arranged for you to reside at Thornfield Estate, in Northumberland." The words landed like stones. Northumberland. That's nearly 300 miles away, Eliza said slowly. "Yes, Your Grace." "For how long?" Grimshaw's silence was answer enough. "I see." Eliza's hands were shaking. She folded them in her lap, squeezing until her knuckles went white. "And the Duke? Will he be accompanying me?" "No, Your Grace. His Grace's business requires him to remain in London." "Business, of course." When did he make this decision? The question came out sharper than intended. Grimshaw shifted his weight, the first sign of discomfort he'd shown. The arrangements were made before the wedding, Your Grace. Before. He'd planned this before they'd even spoken vows. Married her, exiled her, all in one smooth transaction. I'd like to speak with my husband, Eliza said, rising to her feet. His Grace has retired for the evening and left instructions not to be disturbed. I'm his wife. Yes, Your Grace. Nevertheless, Eliza wanted to scream, wanted to tear down these gray curtains and smash the gray porcelain and set fire to this whole gray prison of a house. Instead, she did what she'd learned to do during years of her father's declining fortunes and her mother's shrill anxiety. She locked everything down, deep inside where no one could see it break. Very well, she said quietly. Thank you, Mr. Grimshaw. He bowed and left, and Eliza stood alone in her new sitting room, listening to the silence of her new life. The journey north took 5 days of brutal travel over increasingly rough roads. Eliza's carriage was well appointed but solitary. No other vehicles accompanied her, no outriders beyond the basic security. The driver was named Thomas, a taciturn man in his 50s who responded to questions with grunts and seemed to view conversation as a personal affront. They stopped at coaching inns each night, where Eliza ate alone in private rooms and slept in beds that grew progressively worse as they traveled farther from London's influence. By the third day, the landscape had transformed from rolling green hills into something harder, starker, fewer trees, more stone. The sky seemed bigger here, pressing down with clouds that threatened but never quite delivered rain. How much farther? Eliza asked on the morning of the 5th day. Thomas squinted at the horizon. Reach Thornfield by nightfall, Your Grace. If the weather holds. The weather did not hold. By afternoon, wind had picked up, carrying the smell of rain and something else, something wild and ancient. The road became rougher, forcing the carriage to slow to a crawl over ruts and loose stones. Eliza pulled back the curtain and saw nothing. Just moor stretching in every direction, brown and gray and relentlessly empty. Good Lord, she whispered. Where was the village, the town? Even a cluster of cottages would have been welcome. But there was nothing, just endless windswept emptiness broken occasionally by a stone wall or a stubborn tree bent nearly horizontal by constant gales. Thornfield Estate, when it finally appeared through the gathering dusk, looked like something out of a Gothic nightmare. The main house was large, larger than Eliza had expected, but clearly ancient and clearly suffering from years of neglect. Dark stone walls, windows that seemed to stare like hollow eyes. Parts of the roof were missing tiles. Ivy had claimed entire sections of the facade, strangling shutters and creeping across the entrance like nature itself was trying to reclaim the building. The carriage stopped. Thomas climbed down and opened the door, his face carefully neutral. Eliza stepped out into wind that nearly knocked her sideways. Her traveling cloak whipped around her legs. The smell hit her immediately, peat smoke and dampness and decay. Is anyone here? She called over the wind. As if in answer, the front door creaked open. A woman emerged, elderly, rail-thin, wrapped in a shawl that had seen better decades. She squinted at Eliza with open suspicion. You'd be the new Duchess, then, the woman said. Not a question, not even particularly polite. I am, and you are? Mrs. Briggs, housekeeper. She made the title sound like a warning. Wasn't told you were arriving today. I sent word a week ago, Mrs. Briggs sniffed. Mail's unreliable out here. Come in then, before you freeze. The interior of Thornfield was somehow worse than the exterior. Cold. So cold Eliza could see her breath. The entrance hall was cavernous and empty. No furniture, no rugs, just flagstone floors and walls that wept with damp. A single candle provided the only light, throwing shadows that made the space feel even more vast and unwelcoming. I've prepared the east bedroom, Mrs. Briggs said, already moving toward a staircase that looked like it might collapse at any moment. Fires lit, though the chimney smoked something fierce. Haven't had proper staff here in years. Just me and old Tom, who minds the grounds when his rheumatism allows. Years? Eliza stopped walking. How long has this estate been unoccupied? Mrs. Briggs paused on the stairs, looking back with something that might have been amusement. His Grace hasn't visited Thornfield in near 20 years, Your Grace. Not since he inherited it from his uncle. Property's been maintained, barely, but lived in? No, you're the first soul to sleep here since Lord Cedric died in 82. 20 years. Abandoned for 20 years. And this is where her husband had sent her. The bedroom was marginally better than the rest of the house, but only marginally. The fire Mrs. Briggs had mentioned was smoking heavily, filling the room with a haze that stung Eliza's eyes. The bed was massive and ancient, with curtains that might have been red once, but had faded to a dingy rust color. A single window looked out over the moor, where darkness was now complete except for the faint glow of what might have been a distant farmhouse. "I'll have your trunk brought up," Mrs. Briggs said. "Supper's cold meat and bread. Kitchen's barely functional. We'll need to arrange supplies from the village." "What village?" "Morton, 6 miles south. Market day's Wednesday." Mrs. Briggs headed for the door, then paused. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but did His Grace explain the situation here?" "His Grace didn't explain anything." Eliza's voice came out harder than intended. "I arrived in London for my wedding. 24 hours later, I was on a carriage heading north. The extent of my husband's communication has been through servants and written instructions." Mrs. Briggs's expression shifted, still not warm, but perhaps less hostile. "Aye. That sounds like a blackthorn. Well, you're here now. Make of it what you will." She left, footsteps echoing down the corridor. Eliza stood in the smoking room, still wearing her traveling cloak, and finally, let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. Married, exiled, abandoned. In 3 days, her entire life had been dismantled and reconstructed into this, a cold room in a dying house at the edge of nowhere, with a husband who'd erased her from his existence without even the courtesy of an explanation. She should cry. Women in novels always cried at moments like this. But Eliza's eyes remained dry. Instead, she felt something else building in her chest, something hotter and sharper than tears. Rage. Int. The first week at Thornfield was a masterclass in misery. The smoking chimney couldn't be fixed because there was no one to fix it. Old Tom turned out to be nearly 80, deaf in one ear, and primarily concerned with the small vegetable garden he maintained near the stables. Mrs. Briggs ran the household with grim efficiency, but made it clear she had no interest in companionship or conversation. Eliza explored the house, discovering rooms filled with furniture draped in sheets, portraits of stern-faced ancestors, and an overwhelming sense of abandonment. The library had potential, walls of books, though many were damaged by damp, but the windows didn't seal properly, and the cold made extended reading nearly impossible. She wrote to Adrian. 3 letters in the first week alone, each carefully worded to avoid overt accusation while making clear that the situation was untenable. "Your Grace, I have arrived at Thornfield and found the estate in considerable disrepair. I would be grateful for guidance regarding household management and funds for necessary repairs. Adrian, I must confess some confusion about the expectations for my residence here. Perhaps we might discuss the arrangement in person. I am writing to request your presence at Thornfield at your earliest convenience. There are urgent matters requiring attention." No response came. Not to the first letter, not to the second. By the time she sent the third, Eliza had stopped expecting an answer. On the 8th day, she woke to find snow blanketing the moor. Not the gentle, picturesque snow of London parks. This was harsh, wind-driven snow that turned the landscape into an undifferentiated white void. The temperature in the house dropped so severely that water in the pitcher beside her bed froze solid overnight. "We're snowed in," Mrs. Briggs announced at breakfast, a meal consisting of porridge that had gone cold during its journey from kitchen to dining room. Could be days before the road's passable again. "What about supplies?" "We've enough for now. Might get tight if it lasts past a week." Eliza set down her spoon. The porridge was gray. Everything in this house was gray. "Mrs. Briggs, I need you to be frank with me. What exactly is the situation with this estate? Financially, I mean." The housekeeper's eyebrows rose. "You don't know?" "I know nothing. I'm operating entirely in the dark." Mrs. Briggs was quiet for a long moment, weighing something. Finally, "Thornfield's been bleeding money for years. The tenant farms barely produce enough to cover their own costs, let alone turn a profit. Half the cottages are empty because families moved away when the work dried up. His Grace sends money quarterly to cover basic maintenance, but it's not near enough for proper repairs or improvements." "How much does he send?" £200 per quarter. That's, Eliza did quick mental math. That's barely enough to maintain a London townhouse, let alone an estate this size. Aye, we make do. Patch what we can, let the rest decay. And the tenants. How many are there? 6 farms still occupied. Most are struggling. Poor soil, poor yields. They pay what rent they can, when they can. Mr. Wickham, he's the land agent, he comes round quarterly to collect. But there's not much to collect. Eliza pushed away the porridge. I need to see the estate records, all of them. Financial statements, tenant agreements, property assessments, everything. Mrs. Briggs looked skeptical. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but that's not really... ladies don't typically... I'm not a typical lady. I'm a duchess with nothing else to do and a house that's falling apart around me. The records, please. What Eliza discovered in the estate office, a cramped room on the 2nd floor that smelled of mildew and mouse droppings, was worse than she'd imagined. The records were incomplete, poorly organized, and in some cases simply fictional. Mr. Wickham, the land agent, appeared to be either catastrophically incompetent or actively embezzling. Rents hadn't been properly collected in years. Repairs that had supposedly been completed and paid for showed no evidence of actual work. She spent 3 days going through the papers, making notes, creating lists. The work was tedious and cold. The office had no fireplace, but it gave her something she desperately needed, a problem to solve that wasn't her marriage. By the time the snow melted enough for travel, Eliza had a plan. I need to visit the tenant farms, she announced to Mrs. Briggs. In this weather, the roads are... I don't care about the roads. I need to understand the situation firsthand. Can old Tom manage a cart? Mrs. Briggs looked like she wanted to argue. Instead, she just sighed. I'll tell him to ready the pony cart. But don't say I didn't warn you when you catch your death of cold. The tenant farms were scattered across the moor, connected by tracks that could barely be called roads. Old Tom drove the pony cart with the same enthusiasm he brought to everything, which is to say, none, while Eliza bundled in every piece of warm clothing she owned and still felt the cold seeping into her bones. The first farm belonged to a family named Crawford. The cottage was small but well-maintained, with smoke rising from the chimney and chickens scratching in a yard protected from the wind by a clever arrangement of stone walls. A woman answered Eliza's knock, 30s, work-worn, with suspicious eyes that widened when she recognized the quality of Eliza's cloak. Mrs. Crawford? Eliza asked. Aye, who's asking? I'm the Duchess of Blackthorn. I've recently come to reside at Thornfield, and I'm visiting the estate properties. Mrs. Crawford's expression didn't warm. Did Wickham send you? Because we already told him. We'll pay what we can when the lambing's done, not before. Mr. Wickham didn't send me. I'm here on my own initiative. Eliza tried a smile. It felt rusty from disuse. I wonder if I might come in. Just for a moment, I'd like to understand how things operate here. The cottage interior was crowded. Mr. Crawford, 4 children of various ages, and a grandfather huddled by the fire. But warm. Genuinely warm for the first time since Eliza had arrived in Northumberland. She found herself gravitating toward the hearth like a plant toward sunlight. We're honest folk, Mr. Crawford said, standing near the table with his arms crossed. We work hard, but the land here, it's not like down south. Takes more effort for less yield. And when Wickham raises the rent every year while doing nothing to help with improvements, he raises the rent? Eliza pulled out the notes she'd brought. According to the records I found, the rent hasn't changed in 5 years. The Crawfords exchanged glances. He raises it, Mrs. Crawford said firmly. Every year, tells us it's the Duke's orders. How much are you currently paying? £30 per annum? Eliza checked her notes. The official record showed £15. I see. And the cottage repairs that were supposedly completed last spring. The roof work? Mr. Crawford laughed bitterly. What roof work? We patched it ourselves because Wickham said there was no money for proper repairs. By the time Eliza visited all 6 tenant farms, a clear picture had emerged. Wickham was systematically defrauding the estate, collecting rent at inflated rates, recording lower amounts, and pocketing the difference, charging for repairs that never happened, and all while the tenants struggled and the estate crumbled. I'm going to fix this, Eliza told the last family she visited. the Hendersons, who farmed the northernmost property and seemed on the verge of abandoning it entirely. I can't promise immediate changes, but I'm going to fix it. Mrs. Henderson, holding a baby who wouldn't stop coughing, looked at her with exhausted skepticism. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but we've heard promises before. I know, but mine will be different. Eliza stood, pulling her cloak tight against the wind that howled through gaps in the Hendersons' walls. Because unlike Mr. Wickham, I actually live here. This is my home now, and I'll be damned if I let it die without a fight. Confronting Wickham required traveling to Morton, the village 6 miles south that served as the region's commercial center. Eliza made the journey on a market Wednesday, enduring the miserable cart ride while old Tom maintained his usual silence. Morton was small, perhaps 30 buildings clustered around a central square, but bustling with activity. Farmers selling produce, merchants hawking goods, and locals gathering to exchange news and gossip. Eliza's arrival caused a visible stir. People stopped mid-conversation to stare. Whispers followed her like a wake. Wickham's office occupied a narrow building near the square. Eliza didn't bother knocking, just pushed open the door and walked in. The man behind the desk looked up, startled. He was middle-aged, running to fat, with the soft hands of someone who'd never done manual labor. Can I help? Oh, recognition dawned. Your Grace, I wasn't expecting. Mr. Wickham. Eliza closed the door behind her. We need to discuss the management of Thornfield Estate. He stood, smoothing his waistcoat. Of course. Please, sit. Can I offer you tea? No. Eliza remained standing, placing her folder of notes on his desk. I've spent the past 2 weeks reviewing the estate records and visiting the tenant farms. I found some significant discrepancies. Wickham's smile didn't falter, but something flickered in his eyes. Discrepancies? The rent you're collecting versus the rent you're recording. The repairs you're charging for versus the repairs actually completed. Shall I continue? Your Grace, I think there's been some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. Eliza opened the folder, pulling out her carefully documented evidence. The Crawfords are paying £30 annual rent. Your records show 15. The Hendersons are paying $25. Your records show 12. The roof repair on the Morrison farm charged at £40 last year. Never happened. I could go on. Wickham's face had gone red. These are serious accusations. They're not accusations. They're facts. And here's another fact. You're dismissed, effective immediately. I'll be taking over management of the estate personally. You can't... He caught himself, switching tactics. Your Grace, with all due respect, estate management is complex work. It requires experience, knowledge of local conditions, relationships with the tenants. Perhaps if you spoke with His Grace first. His Grace sent me here and hasn't responded to a single letter since. I think it's safe to say he's delegated authority for Thornfield to me. Eliza met Wickham's eyes without flinching. You have until the end of the week to provide a full accounting of all funds collected and dispersed over the past 5 years. Any money found to be missing will be repaid, either voluntarily or through legal action. Do we understand each other? For a moment she thought he might argue, might try to bluster or threaten. Instead, he deflated like a punctured bladder. Yes, Your Grace, he muttered. Good. I'll expect the accounting by Friday. Eliza left the office with her heart pounding and her hands shaking, but also with something that felt dangerously close to triumph. She'd done it, taken action, made a decision, and enforced it. For the first time since arriving at Thornfield, she felt like something other than a victim of circumstances. The market square was still busy. Eliza made her way through the crowd toward where she'd left old Tom with the cart, aware of the stares and whispers intensifying. A woman selling bread actually stopped mid-transaction to watch her pass. Your Grace? Eliza turned. A man had approached, older, well-dressed by local standards, with shrewd eyes and a weathered face that suggested a lifetime of outdoor work. Yes? Name's Robert Ashford. I farm north of Thornfield. Independent property, not estate land. He touched his hat respectfully. Heard what you did with Wickham. Whole village'll know by sunset. I see. If you're serious about rebuilding that estate, you'll need help. Someone who knows farming in these parts, understands the weather, the soil. I've got no particular love for Blackthorn, no offense intended, but I respect someone willing to actually work instead of just taking. Eliza studied him, weighing the offer against her complete lack of agricultural knowledge. What would you want in return? Ashford smiled. Fair wage for fair work, and maybe the satisfaction of seeing Thornfield actually produce something again. My father worked those lands before the old Duke let everything go to hell. Always bothered me, seeing good soil wasted. Then consider yourself hired, Mr. Ashford. Can you start Monday? Yes, Your Grace. They shook hands, his calloused and strong, hers soft but steadier than they'd been in weeks. And Eliza walked back to the pony cart feeling something she hadn't felt since the morning of her wedding. Hope. Spring came late to the moor, but arrived with dramatic intensity. One day the ground was frozen and dead. The next, green was erupting everywhere. Eliza threw open every window in Thornfield despite Mrs. Briggs's protests about drafts, desperate to clear out the smell of smoke and damp that had permeated the house all winter. With Ashford's guidance, she'd begun implementing changes. Real changes. They'd renegotiated tenant rents based on realistic assessments of land productivity, organized a cooperative system for sharing equipment and labor, started repairs on the most damaged cottages using funds Eliza had, after much threatening, extracted from Wickham's ill-gotten gains. It was hard work, exhausting, frustrating, sometimes seemingly impossible work. Eliza learned about crop rotation and sheep breeding and drainage systems. She learned how to negotiate with stubborn farmers who didn't trust outsiders, especially not outsiders who happened to be nobility. She learned to read weather patterns and calculate yields and make decisions that affected families' livelihoods. She also learned that she was good at it. You've got a head for this, Ashford told her one afternoon as they surveyed the Morrison farm, where new drainage ditches were already showing results. Not many people can look at land and see what it could be instead of just what it is. I've had plenty of practice seeing potential in hopeless situations, Eliza said dryly. Her correspondence with Adrian had dwindled to nothing. She still sent monthly reports, detailed accounts of estate activities and finances, but stopped expecting responses. He'd made his position clear. She was here. He was there. That was the arrangement. Fine. If he wanted distance, she'd give him distance, and she'd build something here that didn't need him. By midsummer, Thornfield was transforming. Not completely. There were still crumbling walls and smoking chimneys and a dozen other problems that would take years to fix, but visibly. The tenant farms showed improved yields. The village had stopped viewing her with quite so much suspicion. Even Mrs. Briggs had thawed slightly, occasionally offering something resembling approval when a particularly difficult problem got solved. Eliza was in the estate office reviewing harvest projections when Mrs. Briggs knocked. Your Grace, there's a letter from London. Eliza's hand stilled on the papers. In 8 months, Adrian had sent exactly 0 personal correspondence. This would be the first. The letter was brief, formal, written in a clerk's hand, not Adrian's. Her Grace. The Duchess of Blackthorn is hereby informed that His Grace, the Duke of Blackthorn, will be undertaking a tour of northern properties beginning in September. Thornfield Estate is included in this itinerary. His Grace will arrive on or about the 15th of September and remain for a duration of 3 days. That was it. No greeting, no signature, just information delivered like a weather report. He's coming here, Eliza said aloud. Mrs. Briggs hovered in the doorway. Is that good news, Your Grace? Eliza stared at the letter, feeling a complicated tangle of emotions she couldn't quite name. Anger, definitely anger, but also something else, curiosity maybe, or the distant echo of that girl who'd stood at the altar believing, despite everything, that marriage meant partnership. I don't know, she said honestly. I suppose we'll find out. September arrived with the kind of weather that made even the locals nervous. Storms rolling in from the North Sea with winds strong enough to rip tiles from roofs and rain that fell sideways. Eliza stood at the morning room window watching sheets of water batter the moor while Mrs. Briggs fretted behind her. The east wing still isn't ready. Those bedchambers haven't been properly aired in months, and the damp— Then we'll put 'em in the south wing, Eliza said without turning around. The rooms I've actually been maintaining. But those are your quarters, Your Grace. I'm aware. I'll move to the east wing. Mrs. Briggs made a strangled sound. You can't sleep in the east wing. It's practically uninhabitable. I've spent 9 months making uninhabitable spaces functional, Mrs. Briggs. I think I can manage a few more days. Eliza turned from the window, her reflection ghostly in the rain-streaked glass. Has there been any word about when exactly he's arriving? The letter just said the 15th. Today's the 14th, Your Grace. I'm aware of that, too. The truth was Eliza had been counting down the days with something approaching dread. She'd built a life here. Not the life she'd imagined on her wedding day, but a real life nonetheless. She'd earned the respect of the tenants, turned the estate finances from catastrophic to merely concerning, and transformed herself from a discarded bride into someone who actually mattered. The last thing she needed was Adrian Blackthorne sweeping in to remind her that technically, legally, none of this belonged to her. It all belonged to him. I want a full inventory of supplies, Eliza said, forcing her mind back to practical matters. If he's bringing staff, we'll need to feed them and check the stables. Actually, where's old Tom? Tending the horses, Your Grace, about the dinner arrangements. Keep it simple. We're a working estate, not a London townhouse trying to impress. Roast mutton, root vegetables, whatever bread Henderson's wife has been baking. Local cheese. Make it clear this is the North, not some polished fantasy. Mrs. Briggs looked uncertain. His Grace can expect whatever he likes. This is Thornfield. He'll get Thornfield. The housekeeper left, still muttering about linens and silverware. Eliza returned to the window, watching the storm intensify. Somewhere out there on these roads, Adrian was traveling toward her. The man who'd married her and erased her in the same breath. The man who'd spent 9 months ignoring every letter she sent while she'd clawed this estate back from the edge of ruin. What did he want? Why come now, after all this time? The letter had mentioned a tour of northern properties, which suggested this was business, not personal. Fine. She could do business. She'd become rather good at it. But standing there watching the rain, Eliza felt something she didn't want to examine too closely. Not quite fear, not quite anger. Something sharper and more complicated that sat in her chest like a stone. The storm worsened overnight. By dawn of the 15th, the moor had transformed into a landscape of mud and standing water. Eliza watched from her new bedroom in the east wing, which was, as Mrs. Briggs had warned, both freezing and damp, and wondered if the weather might actually prevent Adrian's arrival entirely. No such luck. The carriages appeared around noon, emerging from the rain like ships through fog. 2 of them, the first a large traveling coach with the Blackthorne crest emblazoned on the door, the second a smaller vehicle presumably carrying luggage and servants. They navigated the muddy drive with difficulty, wheels churning through standing water. Eliza forced herself to remain in the morning room rather than rushing to the entrance like an anxious servant. She'd positioned herself at the writing desk with estate ledgers spread before her, a deliberate choice. Let him find her working. Let him see immediately that she wasn't some decorative duchess waiting passively for his attention. Voices echoed from the entrance hall. Mrs. Briggs's nervous greeting. A deeper voice responding. Adrian's voice, though Eliza had heard it so rarely she barely recognized it. The sound of it sent an involuntary shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Footsteps approached. The door opened. Your Grace, Mrs. Briggs announced unnecessarily. His Grace the Duke has arrived. Eliza looked up from the ledgers, taking her time about it. Adrian stood in the doorway, and the first thing she registered was how tired he looked. The second was how much older. It had only been 9 months, but something about him seemed more weathered, more worn. His hair had more silver. Lines bracketed his mouth that she didn't remember from the wedding. He was also staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Your Grace, Eliza said, rising but not moving from behind the desk. The formal title felt absurd, but she'd be damned if she'd call him Adrian when he'd never given her permission to use his given name. Welcome to Thornfield, Duchess. He inclined his head slightly. I trust the journey notice was sufficient? Barely. But we manage, she gestured to the ledgers. I was just reviewing the quarterly accounts. Would you like to see them? Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe? That won't be necessary. I'm sure the estate agent has provided adequate reports. The estate agent was stealing from you. I dismissed him 8 months ago. Adrian went very still. You dismissed Wickham. I did. He was collecting inflated rents from the tenants, recording lower amounts, and pocketing the difference. also charging for repairs that never happened. The discrepancies were significant. I can show you the documentation if you'd like. Adrian seemed to be struggling with something. You've been managing the estate yourself? Did you think I was just sitting here embroidering handkerchiefs? The words came out sharper than intended, but Eliza didn't regret them. There was work that needed doing, so I did it. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then, I'd like to see those accounts after all. They spent the next 2 hours in the estate office, the cramped, cold room that had become Eliza's command center. She walked him through everything: the tenant farm reorganization, the cooperative equipment sharing system, the repairs prioritized by urgency rather than aesthetics, the improved yields already showing in harvest projections. Adrian listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. Occasionally he'd ask a question, technical, pointed questions that suggested he actually understood agricultural economics. But mostly, he just absorbed the information in silence. "The Hendersons," he said finally, pointing to a notation in the ledger. "You reduced their rent by 40%. Their land is the poorest on the estate. The previous rent was impossible to sustain. They were on the verge of abandoning the property entirely, which would have left us with empty buildings falling into ruin. The reduced rent keeps them viable while we implement drainage improvements that should increase productivity over the next 3 years. That's a significant loss of income. It's a strategic investment. A functioning farm at reduced rent generates more value than an abandoned property generating nothing." Eliza met his eyes directly. "I'm not running a charity, Your Grace. I'm running a business. Everything I've done has been calculated to improve long-term profitability." Adrian set down the ledger he'd been studying. "You've done remarkable work here." The compliment caught her off guard. "Thank you. I mean it. These improvements, the financial turnaround alone is impressive. But the tenant relationships, the infrastructure planning, this is work that typically requires experienced estate managers with years of training. I didn't have years. I had 9 months and a choice between learning or watching everything collapse." Eliza kept her voice level. "Desperation is an excellent teacher." Something in Adrian's expression shifted. "Eliza, don't." She held up a hand. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. Not if it's an apology, not if it's an explanation. I've built something here, something real. And I did it without you, which was the entire point, wasn't it? Send the inconvenient wife away, let her disappear into the countryside, problem solved. That wasn't—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "It's more complicated than that." "Then explain it. Because from where I'm standing, you married me to save your political reputation or settle some debt to my father, then exiled me the moment the ceremony ended. 9 months, Adrian. 9 months of silence." "I read your reports." "Oh, you read them? How generous." Eliza's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the desk to hide it. "Did it ever occur to you that I might need more than your distant acknowledgement of my existence? Did you think about what it was like for me, arriving here alone, in winter, to a house that was falling apart with people who viewed me as an unwanted intruder?" Adrian's face had gone pale. "I thought—" He stopped again, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that looked almost helpless. "I thought you'd be better off away from London." "Away from me?" "Better off?" I was terrified. I was 22 years old, married to a stranger, abandoned in a place I'd never seen before. What possible universe exists where that's better? A universe where my enemies can't use you against me. The words came out harsh, almost angry. A universe where being associated with me doesn't put you in danger. Eliza stared at him. "What are you talking about?" Adrian moved to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked moor. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "There are people in London who would very much like to destroy me. Politically, financially, personally. They're not particular about methods. Your father's disgrace created an opportunity. The marriage was meant to provide you with protection and resources while removing you from the immediate battlefield." "Protection." Eliza's voice was flat. "You call abandoning me protection?" "I call keeping you alive protection. Do you know what happened to the last woman who got too close to me, who people thought mattered to me?" He turned back from the window, and his face was set in hard lines. "She died, Eliza. Carriage accident on a perfectly clear day. Very convenient for my political opponents." The words hung in the cold air between them. Eliza felt something shift in her understanding, pieces rearranging into a pattern she hadn't seen before. So you married me and sent me away to what? Keep me safe by making sure no one thought I mattered to you? Yes. Did it occur to you to explain this, to give me a choice? Would you have accepted if I had? Adrian's laugh was bitter. Would you have agreed to a marriage of pure convenience, exiled to the wilderness for your own protection? Or would you have insisted on staying in London, being a proper duchess, making yourself a target? Eliza wanted to argue, but honesty stopped her. 9 months ago, she'd been a different person, more naive, more desperate for approval, more willing to accept traditional arrangements. Would she have chosen exile if given the option? Probably not. That's not the point, she said finally. You didn't give me the information needed to make an informed decision. You just made choices for me and expected me to accept them. You're right. Adrian's shoulders sagged slightly. You're absolutely right. I handled this badly. All of it. The admission diffused some of Eliza's anger, replacing it with exhaustion. She sank into the chair behind the desk, suddenly aware of how tired she was, how much energy it took to maintain this confrontation. Why are you here now? She asked. The political situation has evolved. Some of my enemies have been neutralized. Others have moved on to different targets. It seemed safe to visit, to see how you were managing. I'm managing fine, as you can see. Better than fine. Adrian hesitated, then pulled up the other chair, a rickety thing that creaked under his weight. I need to tell you something else, about why I came. Eliza waited. I'm sick, he said simply. Have been for several months. The physicians think it's consumption, though they're not certain. Whatever it is, it's getting worse. The words hit like a physical blow. Eliza looked at him more carefully, seeing details she'd missed in her anger. The gauntness under his clothes, the way he'd been moving with careful precision, as if fighting pain. The exhaustion wasn't just from travel. How bad? She asked. Bad enough that I needed to make arrangements, including ensuring that you're provided for regardless of what happens. He pulled a folded document from his jacket. This is a trust document. It transfers full ownership of Thornfield to you, along with a substantial annual income independent of the duchy estates. If I die, you'll be financially secure. If I recover, you'll still have autonomy. Eliza took the document but didn't open it. Why? Because you've earned it, because I've treated you abominably, and this is the only restitution I can offer, and because… He stopped, choosing words carefully. Because you're the only person I've met in the last decade who seems to actually accomplish things instead of just talking about them. Thornfield was dying. You've brought it back to life. That deserves recognition. She wanted to throw the document in his face, wanted to rage about how money couldn't fix what he'd broken, how legal arrangements didn't address the fundamental betrayal of being erased from her own marriage. But looking at him, at this sick, tired man who'd traveled 300 miles in a storm to have this conversation, she felt her anger fragmenting into something more complicated. I don't want your guilt money, she said. It's not guilt money. It's an acknowledgement of reality. You've built something here. It should belong to you. Before Eliza could respond, urgent knocking interrupted them. Mrs. Briggs burst in without waiting for permission, her face flushed. Your Grace, both your Graces, there's trouble at the Henderson farm. Young Tom just rode in, says the river's flooded and the cottage is taking on water. The family's trapped. Eliza was on her feet immediately. How bad? Water's waist-high and rising. They've gone to the upper floor, but Tom says the whole structure's unstable. Could collapse. Adrian stood too, wincing slightly. What's the fastest route there? Horseback, Eliza said, already moving toward the door. The cart can't handle the mud, and the river crossing's impassable. Mrs. Briggs, get word to Ashford and anyone else who can help. We'll need ropes, probably boats if anyone has them. Your Grace, you can't possibly. I know that farm better than anyone. I know the family, and I'm going. Eliza stopped at the door, looking back at Adrian. You should stay here. You're not well enough for… I'm going, he said flatly. Argue if you want, but it won't change anything. There wasn't time to argue. Eliza ran for the stables, Adrian following more slowly. Old Tom had already saddled 2 horses, hers and a larger stallion that must have come with Adrian's traveling party. The rain was relentless, turning the stable yard into a soup of mud. Show me the route, Adrian said, pulling himself into the saddle with visible effort. Eliza mounted her mare, a tough moorland horse she'd bought 3 months ago, specifically for estate travel. It's rough terrain and we'll be riding into the storm. Can you actually handle this? I'll manage. Go. They rode hard through conditions that would have been dangerous even in good weather. The moor was transformed into a treacherous landscape of standing water and hidden holes. Lightning cracked overhead, making the horses skittish. Eliza focused on the route, trusting her mare's instincts when visibility dropped to almost nothing. The Henderson farm appeared through the rain like a nightmare made real. The river that normally ran 100 yards from the cottage had swelled into a raging torrent that had already swallowed the lower pastures. The cottage itself stood in water that lapped at the second-story windows. Christ, Adrian breathed. 3 other riders were already there, Ashford and 2 of the tenant farmers, struggling to secure a rope across the flood. Ashford looked up as Eliza and Adrian approached, his face grim. Current's too strong for a boat. We're trying to get a line secured so they can pull themselves across, but a scream cut through the storm. At the cottage's upper window, Mrs. Henderson appeared holding her baby. Behind her, Eliza could see her husband and the 2 older children. "The floor's giving way!" Mrs. Henderson's voice barely carried over the wind. "We can't." The cottage shifted. Not much, just a slight lean, but enough to make everyone freeze. The entire structure was unstable, slowly being undermined by the flood. "We're out of time," Eliza said. "That building's going to collapse." "The rope's not secured," Ashford protested. "If we try to cross now, then we secure it faster." Eliza was already dismounting, moving toward the rope. "Get it anchored on this side. I'm the lightest. I'll take the other end across." "Absolutely not," Adrian said. "You're not going into that water." "Someone has to, and I'm the most expendable person here." "You're not expendable. I'm also the one who knows that family best. Mrs. Henderson trusts me. If anyone's going to get her to jump into floodwater with a baby, it's going to be me." Eliza was already stripping off her heavy riding coat, down to just her dress. "Ashford, the rope. Now." Ashford handed it over, his face showing the calculation. She was right, and he knew it. Someone had to go, and she was the logical choice. Adrian grabbed her arm. "Eliza, you could die." "So could they. At least I have a choice." She pulled free, meeting his eyes. "This is my estate. These are my people. I'm not standing here watching them drown." She didn't wait for his response, just tied the rope around her waist with knots she'd learned from the fishermen in Morton and walked into the flood. The cold hit like a hammer. The current was vicious, trying to sweep her legs out from under her immediately. Eliza fought forward, step by step, feeling for solid ground that kept disappearing. Water rose to her thighs, her waist, her chest. Behind her, she could feel the rope tight, someone holding it, keeping her from being swept away entirely. Halfway across, her foot found nothing. She went under, water filling her mouth and nose, the world becoming a roaring chaos of current and cold. The rope jerked tight, hauling her back up. She surfaced gasping, spitting water, already moving forward again. The cottage was close now, 20 feet, 15. The door was underwater, but there was a window just above the flood line. Mr. Henderson was there, reaching out. "Grab the rope," Eliza shouted. He caught it, pulling her the last few feet. Hands grabbed her shoulders, hauling her through the window into the cottage's upper floor. Water was already seeping up through the floorboards. The whole structure groaned like a dying animal. "We need to move fast," Eliza gasped. "Tie the rope around the children first. They'll pull them across from the other side." "The baby," Mrs. Henderson was sobbing. "We'll use a sling. I'll carry her across myself if I have to." Eliza was already untying the rope from her waist. "But we need to move now. This building won't last much longer." They worked with desperate speed. The 2 older children went first, tied to the rope and pulled across by the men on the far side. They made it, small figures hauled dripping from the water. Then Mr. Henderson, who was strong enough to help from the other side once across. That left Eliza, Mrs. Henderson, and the baby. "You next," Eliza said to Mrs. Henderson. "I'll carry the baby." "I can't leave her. You'll drown both of you if you try to cross together. Trust me." Eliza took the baby, barely 6 months old, screaming in terror, and wrapped her in the makeshift sling they'd rigged from Mrs. Henderson's shawl. "I promise I'll get her across, but you need to go first. Now." Mrs. Henderson went, sobbing. The cottage groaned again, louder. Through the window, Eliza could see the wall beginning to crack. She tied the rope around herself and the baby, checking the knots twice. The child was still screaming, which was somehow better than if she'd gone quiet. Screaming meant alive, meant fighting. "Hold on," Eliza whispered to her. "Just hold on." She lowered herself into the water. The current was worse now, fed by additional runoff from upstream. The baby's screams intensified as the cold water hit her. Eliza held her above the surface, fighting forward. Behind her, the cottage made a sound like thunder. She glanced back in time to see the entire structure tilt, walls collapsing inward, roof caving. If she'd waited even 2 more minutes, the rope jerked. Someone was pulling hard from the other side, dragging her faster through the current. She focused on keeping her feet, keeping the baby's head above water, moving forward inch by inch. Hands grabbed her, multiple hands, pulling her up and out. She was on solid ground, someone taking the baby, other people wrapping blankets around her shoulders. Eliza's legs gave out and she sat down hard in the mud, watching the Henderson cottage complete its collapse into the flood. "That was the most insane thing I've ever witnessed," Adrian's voice said beside her. Eliza looked up. He was soaked too. She realized he must have been one of the people holding the rope, helping to pull her across. His face was pale, but his eyes were bright with something that looked almost like awe. "The baby?" Eliza managed through chattering teeth. "Crying her lungs out, which means she's fine." Adrian sat down beside her, apparently unconcerned about the mud. "You could have died, but I didn't." "You could have." "Adrian, I've been half dead since the day you sent me here. At least this time I was choosing to risk something for a reason that mattered." He was quiet for a long moment, watching the ruins of the cottage being swept away by the flood. Finally, "I understand why you hate me." "I don't hate you." Eliza pulled the blanket tighter, shivering violently. "I think I wish I did. It would be simpler." "What do you feel then?" She considered the question, too tired and cold to lie. "Angry, confused, and somewhere underneath all of that, still absurdly hoping you might actually see me as something other than a problem to be managed." Adrian turned to look at her fully. "I see you, Eliza. I'm seeing you right now, and what I see is someone extraordinary who deserves far better than what I've given her." Before she could respond, Ashford appeared with horses. "We need to get everyone back before the next band of rain hits. Your Graces, can you ride?" Eliza stood, legs wobbling but functional. "Yes." The ride back to Thornfield passed in a blur of cold and exhaustion. By the time they reached the stable, Eliza was shaking so hard she could barely dismount. Adrian caught her as she stumbled, and she was too tired to protest. Mrs. Briggs had hot baths drawn and warm food ready. Eliza emerged an hour later, clean and dry but feeling hollowed out. She found Adrian in the library, the one room in Thornfield she'd actually made comfortable, sitting by the fire with a glass of brandy. "The Hendersons?" she asked. "Settled in the guest quarters, all alive thanks to you." He gestured to the other chair. "Sit before you fall over." Eliza sat, accepting the brandy he poured. The first sip burned but brought welcome warmth. They sat in silence for several minutes, listening to the rain outside and the fire crackling in the hearth. "I'm staying," Adrian said finally. "Not just for 3 days. For as long as you'll tolerate my presence." Eliza looked at him sharply. "What about London? Your political obligations? Can wait. Or can't? I'm not sure I care anymore." He set down his glass. "I've spent years playing political games, making strategic decisions, treating people like chess pieces. And what did it get me? A dying body, a ruined marriage, and the realization that I've wasted everything that mattered while protecting things that don't. You're not dying. The physicians seem to think otherwise. The physicians in London are idiots. I've met them." Eliza leaned forward, studying his face in the firelight. "When did you last feel well before the symptoms started?" "I don't know. A year ago? Maybe longer. It's been gradual." "Describe the symptoms." He did. Exhaustion, persistent cough, weight loss, night fevers. Eliza listened, mind working through possibilities. She'd learned a lot about medicine in 9 months of managing tenant families. Enough to know that London physicians often missed obvious diagnoses in favor of dramatic ones. "Have you been to the city recently?" she asked. "Spending time in areas with poor air quality?" "I live in London. The air quality is universally poor. The Thames district specifically, the warehouses and factories." Adrian frowned. "My club is near there." "Why?" "Because what you're describing sounds less like consumption and more like chronic exposure to bad air, coal smoke, chemical fumes, whatever else is poisoning London's atmosphere. Eliza stood, pacing. How long have you been a member of that club? 15 years. And the symptoms started when? I'm not sure, maybe... He stopped, realization dawning. Maybe a year ago, right after they expanded the building, added a smoking room. There it is. Eliza felt a surge of satisfaction. You don't have consumption. You have chronic poisoning from breathing toxic air in a confined space for extended periods. Leave London, stop spending time in that club, and give your lungs time to heal. You'll probably be fine. Adrian stared at her. You diagnosed me in 5 minutes when 4 different London physicians couldn't. They wanted you to be dying because dying is interesting. Poisoning from common air pollution is mundane. She sat back down, suddenly exhausted again. But if you actually want to recover, you need to stay here, or somewhere similar. Clean air, quiet, rest. Give your body time to clear out whatever you've been breathing. And you'd tolerate that? Me being here? Eliza considered the question honestly. The man sitting across from her was still the one who'd abandoned her. Still the one who'd made choices without her input. But he was also the one who'd ridden into a storm despite being sick. Who'd held the rope while she risked drowning. Who was looking at her now like she was a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve. On conditions, she said finally. Name them. First, honesty. No more strategic silences. If something affects me, I deserve to know. Agreed. Second, respect my work here. This is my estate now. Not in ownership maybe, but in every way that matters. I make decisions about Thornfield, and you don't override them. Agreed. Third, Eliza hesitated, then pushed forward. You actually talk to me. Not at me, not around me, with me. Like I'm a person whose opinions might matter. Adrian's expression softened. That one I can promise absolutely. The fire crackled. Rain drummed against the windows. And for the first time since her wedding day, Eliza looked at her husband and saw something that might, possibly, turn into partnership. Then you can stay, she said. What she didn't say, what she barely admitted to herself, was that some small, dangerous part of her wanted him to. Adrian stayed, not in the distant, theoretical way Eliza had half expected, where he'd occupy rooms on the opposite end of the house, and she'd see him at dinner if schedules aligned. He stayed in the uncomfortable, unavoidable way that made pretending indifference impossible. He took breakfast in the morning room where she worked on accounts, appeared in the stables when she was checking on the horses, joined her on tenant visits despite his lingering cough, and the fact that riding in October wind was probably terrible for his recovery. You're supposed to be resting, Eliza said on the 4th day, finding him in the estate office reviewing crop rotation plans. I've been resting for 3 days. Any more, and I'll go mad. Adrian looked up from the documents, and something in his expression made her pause. Besides, this is interesting. Ashford's suggestion about alternating root vegetables with nitrogen-fixing crops. Has anyone tried that on moorland soil before? Not successfully. That's why we're starting with just the Morrison farm as a test. Eliza moved to look over his shoulder at the plans. If it works, we'll expand next season. If it fails, we've only wasted resources on one property. Smart. Minimize risk while maintaining innovation. Adrian tapped the document. What about water management? The Morrison land has that drainage problem. Already addressed. We dug new channels last month. Eliza pulled out another set of papers, spreading them across the desk. See these lines? French drains. Revolutionary concept from the continent. Basically underground channels filled with gravel that redirect water away from the fields. And Morrison agreed to this? Morrison was skeptical until I showed him the Henderson farm results. Then he couldn't dig the channels fast enough. Eliza smiled despite herself. Turns out people respond well when you demonstrate actual results instead of just making promises. Adrian studied the drainage plans with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he actually understood what he was looking at. This version of him, engaged, curious, treating her like an equal colleague, was so different from the cold stranger at their wedding that Eliza kept feeling disoriented. Like she'd married one man and been sent a different one 9 months later. They fell into a routine that felt dangerously close to comfortable. Mornings reviewing estate business together. Afternoons spent on separate tasks, Eliza visiting tenants or working with Ashford, Adrian slowly exploring the property on horseback or reading in the library. Evenings in front of the fire, discussing the day's developments over dinner that Mrs. Briggs served with increasingly less anxiety. The housekeeper had thawed considerably since Adrian's arrival, mainly because he'd complimented her cooking and actually meant it. "This is better than anything I get in London," he'd said after the first meal, and Mrs. Briggs had practically glowed. But underneath the comfortable routine, tension built like water behind a dam. They were civil, productive, almost friendly. What they weren't was honest about the fundamental problem. They were married, living in the same house, and had never actually addressed what that meant. 2 weeks after Adrian's arrival, Eliza received a letter that changed everything. It came in the Morning Post, delivered by the weekly mail rider from Morton. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar, elegant, expensive-looking. Eliza opened it at breakfast while Adrian read the London newspapers he'd had sent up. The letter was from someone named Catherine Thorne, Lady Catherine Thorne, to be precise, and its contents made Eliza's blood run cold. "Dear Duchess, we have not been formally introduced, though I feel I know you through Adrian's occasional mentions. I am writing to warn you of a situation developing in London that may affect your position. There are rumors circulating, ugly ones, suggesting that your marriage to the Duke was not legitimate. Someone has been asking questions about the ceremony, the license, even the witnesses. I don't know who's behind it or what their goal is, but the implications are obvious. If they can prove irregularities, they could have the marriage annulled, which would leave you with no legal standing, no financial security, and no protection. Adrian needs to know. He has enemies who would use this, and they're clearly moving against him through you. I'm sending this directly to Thornfield because I suspect his London correspondence is being monitored. Be careful, both of you. Catherine." Eliza read it twice, then a third time, trying to process the implications. Someone was trying to invalidate her marriage, which meant someone knew Adrian was at Thornfield, knew their arrangement was unconventional, and saw an opportunity to strike. "What's wrong?" Adrian had looked up from his newspaper, clearly noticing her expression. Eliza handed him the letter without speaking. She watched his face as he read, saw the color drain from his skin, saw his jaw tighten until the muscle jumped. When he finished, he set the letter down very carefully, like it might explode. "Catherine has impeccable sources," he said quietly. "If she's warning us, the threat is real." "Who would do this, and why?" Adrian laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The list of people who want to destroy me is extensive, but going after the marriage specifically, that suggests someone who knows the circumstances, knows it was arranged quickly, knows you were sent away immediately. They're looking for leverage." "Can they actually invalidate it?" Eliza's hands were shaking. She folded them in her lap. "The ceremony was legal. Witnesses present. Proper license. Legal and unassailable are different things. If someone with enough money and influence pushes hard enough, they can create doubt. Force an investigation. Even if the marriage ultimately stands, the scandal alone would be devastating." Adrian stood abruptly, pacing. "And you'd bear the brunt of it. The whispers, the social ostracism, the questions about your character." "I don't care about London society. You should care about your legal rights. If the marriage is annulled, everything I've given you disappears. The trust, the estate ownership transfer, all of it becomes void. You'd have nothing." The words hit harder than they should have. Eliza had built Thornfield back from ruin, had earned respect and autonomy and a life that mattered. The thought of losing it all because of political machinations in a city she'd never wanted to be part of felt viscerally wrong. "Then we fight," she said. "There must be something we can do. We can return to London, make public appearances together, demonstrate that the marriage is real and functioning." Adrian stopped pacing, looking at her. "But that means subjecting you to exactly the kind of scrutiny and danger I sent you here to avoid. Things have changed. You said your enemies have been neutralized. Some of them, clearly not all." He moved to the window, staring out at the moor. "I won't force you into this, Eliza. If you want to stay here, stay. Let me handle London. And if you can't handle it, if they succeed in annulling the marriage anyway, then at least you'll have been spared the worst of it." Eliza stood, moving to face him directly. "I'm not interested in being spared. I'm interested in fighting for what I've built, which includes this marriage, whether we know what to do with it or not." Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. "You'd go to London? Voluntarily?" I'd go anywhere to protect what's mine. And whether we like it or not, you're technically part of that category now. She held his gaze. But I have conditions. Of course you do. If we're going to London as a united front, we need to actually be united. No more separate lives under the same roof. No more careful distance. Eliza took a breath, pushing through the fear of saying this out loud. If we're married, let's actually be married. Or if we're not, if this is just a political arrangement we're defending, then let's be honest about that too. Adrian went very still. What are you asking for? I'm asking what you want, not what's strategic or protective or politically expedient. What do you actually want from this marriage? The silence stretched so long Eliza thought he might not answer. Then, I want you. The words came out rough, like they'd been dragged from somewhere deep. I've wanted you since that day in the storm when you walked into floodwater without hesitation. Maybe before that. I don't know. But watching you transform this estate, watching you become someone who commands respect through sheer competence and courage, how could I not want that? Eliza's heart was hammering. That's not an answer. Wanting someone doesn't mean wanting to be married to them. Then yes, I want to be married to you. Actually married, not whatever legal fiction we've been living. Adrian took a step closer. I want mornings discussing drainage systems and evenings arguing about agricultural theory. I want to watch you bully stubborn tenants into making smart decisions and then pretend you didn't enjoy it. He stopped, jaw working like the next words were difficult. I want a partner, an equal, someone who sees through my strategic bullshit and calls me on it. And you're the only person I've ever met who does that naturally. Eliza's throat felt tight. You sent me away. I know. You ignored me for 9 months. I know. You made decisions about my life without asking what I wanted. I know. Adrian's voice was quiet but steady. And I can't undo any of that. All I can do is promise to do better going forward. If you'll let me. This was the moment. The choice Catherine's letter had forced into the open, but that had been building since the day Adrian arrived. Eliza could say no, could maintain the careful distance that had kept her safe, could protect herself from the risk of trusting someone who'd already hurt her. Or she could take the same kind of leap she'd taken into the flood, eyes open, aware of the danger, choosing to risk it anyway. Then we go to London, she said, together, as actual partners. And if anyone tries to take this marriage away, they'll have to go through both of us. Adrian's expression transformed, relief and something that looked almost like joy. You're sure? I'm terrified, but yes, I'm sure. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. His fingers were warm, calloused from 2 weeks of riding and outdoor work. Not the soft hands of a London nobleman, but something more real. When do we leave? Eliza asked. Tomorrow, before whoever's behind this has more time to build their case. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours to prepare for a return to the world that had never wanted her in the first place. Eliza felt panic rising but pushed it down. She'd faced worse than London society. She'd survived winter at Thornfield. She'd rebuilt a dying estate from nothing. She could handle this. The journey south took 6 brutal days. Adrian had arranged for a more comfortable carriage than the one Eliza had traveled in originally. Better springs, proper heating, cushions that didn't feel like torture devices. They also traveled faster, stopping only briefly at coaching inns and pushing on before dawn each day. The enforced proximity was strange. They'd grown comfortable in each other's company at Thornfield, but that had been in spaces large enough to maintain distance when needed. The carriage offered no such escape. They sat across from each other for hours, reading or talking, or sometimes just existing in silence that felt increasingly less awkward. Tell me about London, Eliza said on the 3rd day, watching countryside scroll past the window. The version I need to know, not the version people pretend exists. Adrian set aside the book he'd been reading. It's vicious. That's the first thing to understand. Society operates on reputation, and reputation can be destroyed faster than it's built. The people we'll be dealing with, they smile and offer compliments while calculating exactly how to use you against your enemies. Sounds delightful. It's necessary. Power doesn't flow through official channels in England. It flows through drawing rooms and dinner parties and who's sleeping with whom. Adrian's expression was grim. Your enemies won't challenge you directly. They'll whisper, plant doubts, turn your allies against you through rumor and insinuation. And your enemies specifically are numerous and creative, Lord Pemberton hates me because I blocked his banking scheme that would have defrauded half of Parliament. Lady Ashcroft despises me because I refused her daughter's hand before our marriage, made it clear I had no interest in her family's political connections. Then there's Viscount Hartley, who's never forgiven me for exposing his embezzlement from the army supply contracts. Eliza absorbed this. So we're walking into a nest of people who want to see you destroyed. Essentially, yes. And they'll use me to do it. They'll try. Adrian leaned forward. That's why we need to present a united front. No visible cracks. No hesitation. We're a devoted couple who've been living quietly in the country. Any suggestion otherwise is scandalous rumor from jealous parties. Can you do that? Eliza asked. Pretend devotion convincingly? Adrian's eyes met hers, something unreadable in their depths. I won't have to pretend. The words hung between them like a challenge. Eliza felt her face heat and looked away, back to the window where autumn landscape blurred past. They reached London on the 6th day, arriving after dark. The city hit Eliza like a wall. Noise, smell, crowds even at night. After 9 months of moorland silence, the sensory assault was overwhelming. Blackthorn House loomed out of the darkness, exactly as massive and unwelcoming as Eliza remembered. But this time, the entrance was lit. Servants lined up to greet them. It looked almost prepared for her arrival. Your Grace, Grimshaw appeared, bowing. Welcome home. Home. The word felt foreign, but Eliza smiled and nodded, letting Adrian guide her inside while servants swarmed around the carriage with luggage. The interior was just as gray and cold as she remembered, but someone had made an effort. Fires blazed in multiple rooms. Flowers, actual flowers, stood in vases. The drawing room looked almost welcoming. I had some changes made, Adrian said, watching her take it in. After I read your reports and realized how different Thornfield had become, this place needed life. It's better, Eliza admitted. Still not homey, but better. A throat cleared behind them. Eliza turned to find a woman in the doorway, late 30s, beautiful in a sharp-featured way, dressed in expensive traveling clothes. She looked vaguely familiar, though Eliza couldn't place from where. Catherine, Adrian said, moving to greet her. I didn't expect you tonight. I came as soon as I heard you'd arrived. Catherine Thorne swept into the room with the confidence of someone entirely comfortable in these spaces. Her eyes found Eliza, assessing quickly. So, you're the Duchess who's been rebuilding Thornfield single-handedly. I've heard stories. Lady Thorne. Eliza offered her hand. Thank you for the warning. Catherine, please. And I wish the news were better. She accepted a seat when Adrian gestured, arranging her skirts with practiced ease. The rumors have intensified since I wrote. Someone's pushing hard. I don't know who yet, but they have resources and influence. What exactly are they claiming? Adrian asked. That the marriage was coerced, that the license was falsified, that the ceremony itself was irregular, wrong parish, improper witnesses, something like that. Catherine's expression was serious. None of it's true, obviously, but they don't need truth. They need doubt. Who's spreading it? That's the interesting part. The rumors seem to originate from multiple sources simultaneously, which suggests coordination. Someone powerful is orchestrating this. Catherine pulled out a folded paper from her reticule. I've made a list of suspected parties and their motivations. Pemberton is at the top, but there are others. Eliza took the list, scanning names she mostly didn't recognize. What do we do? You attend everything? Every party, every gathering, every social event of note. You let people see you together, happy, devoted, unquestionably married. Make the rumors look like exactly what they are, desperate attacks by jealous enemies. Catherine looked between them. Can you manage that? Yes, Adrian said. At the same time, Eliza said, Probably. Catherine's eyebrow arched. That doesn't inspire confidence. We can manage it, Eliza said more firmly. What else? Find proof of who's behind this. Once we know the source, we can neutralize them. Catherine stood. I'll use my connections to investigate. You two focus on being so obviously married that the rumors die from lack of plausibility. She left in a whirl of silk and purpose. Eliza stared at the door, feeling overwhelmed. She's intense, Eliza said. She's effective. Adrian moved to pour brandy from the sideboard. Catherine's been a valuable ally for years. One of the few people in London I actually trust. Were you ever... Eliza let the question trail off, but Adrian understood. Lovers? No. Catherine prefers women, actually. Her marriage to Lord Thorne is purely political. He gets respectability, she gets independence and resources to live as she chooses. It works for them. He handed Eliza a glass. But she's fiercely protective of the few people she considers friends, which apparently now includes you. Eliza sipped the brandy, feeling its warmth spread. I don't know how to do this, Adrian. London society, political maneuvering, pretending to be something I'm not. You won't be pretending. You'll just be yourself, which is someone extraordinary who doesn't take shit from anyone. Adrian's smile was slight but genuine. That's exactly what London needs to see. The first test came the next evening, a dinner party at the Marchioness of Wexford's townhouse. Unavoidable, Catherine had said. Half of influential London would be there, which meant rumors would spread from it in every direction. Eliza prepared with the same strategic focus she'd brought to estate management. She chose a dress, deep blue silk that Mrs. Briggs had packed, one of the few fine things Eliza owned, and let the lady's maid Adrian had hired arrange her hair in something approximating fashionable style. The result was acceptable. Not spectacular, but not embarrassing. Eliza stared at her reflection and tried to summon confidence she didn't feel. Adrian appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the evening. He stopped, looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. You're beautiful, he said simply. I look nervous. That too, but mostly beautiful. He crossed to her, offering his arm. Ready? No, but let's go anyway. The Wexford house was enormous, blazing with candlelight, and packed with people who all seemed to know each other. Eliza felt eyes land on her the moment they entered, assessing, judging, weighing. Whispers started immediately. Smile, Adrian murmured. Look happy to be here. Eliza smiled. It felt plastic, but she maintained it, letting Adrian guide her through the crowd toward their hostess. The Marchioness of Wexford was formidable, 60s, draped in jewels, with eyes that missed nothing. Blackthorn, she said, offering her hand for Adrian to kiss. And this must be the mysterious Duchess we've heard so little about. Your Grace, Eliza said, curtsying, thank you for including us this evening. Including you? My dear, you're the reason half these people are here. Everyone wants to see the woman who disappeared into the wilderness and emerged. What, exactly? The Marchioness studied her with uncomfortable intensity. You don't look like you've been rusticated. You look like you've been doing something far more interesting. Running an estate mostly, Eliza said. Thornfield required significant attention. So I've heard. Impressive work from what my sources tell me, though there are those who question whether such activities are appropriate for a duchess. The Marchioness's tone was neutral, but the words carried weight. A warning, maybe, or a test. I question whether letting a profitable estate collapse into ruin is appropriate for anyone with a duty to maintain it, Eliza said evenly. Gender seems irrelevant to that calculation. The Marchioness's eyes gleamed. Bold. I appreciate boldness. Circulate, make yourselves visible. And do try to look at least moderately fond of each other. The vultures are circling. They circulated. Eliza smiled until her face hurt, made polite conversation with people whose names she immediately forgot, and tried to project confidence while internally screaming. Adrian stayed close, his hand at her elbow, occasionally interjecting when conversations turned hostile. And they did turn hostile. Not overtly, nobody would be that crude, but in the careful way of people who knew how to wound with politeness. 9 months in Northumberland, one woman said, fan fluttering. However did you survive the isolation, Your Grace? By staying productive? Idle hands and all that? Oh, certainly. Though one does wonder what a woman alone can accomplish without proper guidance. Quite a lot, actually. Eliza kept her smile fixed. I'm happy to discuss drainage systems and crop rotation if you're interested. The woman's expression suggested she'd rather eat glass. She made excuses and fled. You're enjoying this, Adrian murmured. I'm definitely not enjoying this. You're smiling like you're enjoying it. That's terror, not enjoyment. But somewhere around the third confrontation with barely veiled hostility, something shifted. Eliza stopped feeling defensive and started feeling angry. These people, with their jewels and their mansions and their comfortable lives, We're judging her for doing actual work, for taking a dying estate and making it productive, for building something real instead of just maintaining appearances. Screw that. When Lord Pemberton approached, the banking scheme villain from Adrian's list, Eliza was ready. "Duchess," he said, all oily charm. "What a delight to finally meet you. Though I must say the timing of your emergence is curious. One might almost think orchestrated." "One might think a lot of things," Eliza said pleasantly. "Though thinking and knowing are different, aren't they, Lord Pemberton?" His smile tightened. "Indeed, which is why I'm fascinated by your sudden visibility after such extended absence. It raises questions about the nature of your marriage." "Does it? How strange. The nature of my marriage seems quite clear to me. I'm married to the Duke of Blackthorn, legally and completely. Any questions about that exist only in the minds of people with too much time and too little occupation." Pemberton's face flushed. "I merely suggest—" "You suggest nothing. You insinuate, which is what people do when they lack substance for direct accusation." Eliza stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Pemberton and Adrian could hear. "But here's something concrete. I know about the banking scheme, I know about the fraud, and I know about the investors you swindled. If you'd like to continue this conversation about questionable behavior, we can absolutely do that, publicly, if you prefer." Pemberton went pale. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me." He fled. Actually fled, disappearing into the crowd like smoke. Adrian was staring at her with something close to awe. Where did that come from? 9 months of dealing with stubborn tenants and fraudulent land agents. Pemberton's just a better-dressed version of the same problem. Eliza's hands were shaking, but she felt triumphant. Was that too much? That was perfect. The evening continued. More confrontations, more barely veiled hostility, more whispered rumors just loud enough to overhear. But Eliza had found her footing. She wasn't some fragile London lady who'd collapse under scrutiny. She was someone who'd survived a northern winter in a crumbling house and come out stronger. These people didn't scare her. They were leaving, finally, when it happened. Eliza was retrieving her cloak from a servant when she heard a voice behind her. "Well, well, the country bride emerges." She turned. A woman stood there, early 40s, beautiful in a cold way, dripping with diamonds. Lady Ashcroft, Eliza realized, the one whose daughter Adrian had rejected. "Lady Ashcroft," Eliza said neutrally, "I must say, I'm fascinated by your arrangement with Blackthorn. 9 months apart, and now suddenly inseparable? One might wonder what prompted such a dramatic reconciliation. One might mind one's own business." Lady Ashcroft's smile turned sharp. "Touchy? That suggests insecurity, which makes sense given the circumstances of your marriage. Tell me, was the ceremony even legitimate? Or was it a rushed affair to cover some inconvenience?" The implication was clear and vile. Eliza felt rage flash white-hot. "Be very careful what you're suggesting," she said quietly. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking reasonable questions about a highly irregular situation." Lady Ashcroft's voice carried, attracting attention from nearby guests. "A rushed marriage to an unknown woman, immediate separation, prolonged absence. It certainly invites speculation." "Then let me clarify." Eliza's voice was ice. "My marriage is legal, legitimate, and none of your concern. Your disappointment that your daughter wasn't chosen is understandable, but doesn't entitle you to spread malicious lies." "Lies? I'm merely—" "You're jealous, and you're using that jealousy to attack someone you perceive as vulnerable." Eliza stepped closer, voice dropping. "But here's what you failed to understand. I'm not vulnerable. I'm the woman who rebuilt Thornfield Estate from nothing. I'm the woman who dismissed a fraudulent land agent and reorganized tenant farms for optimal productivity. I'm the woman who walked into floodwater to save a family while you were probably deciding which jewels to wear." Lady Ashcroft's face had gone scarlet. "How dare you?" "I dare because, unlike you, I've actually done things worth discussing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have better ways to spend my time than listening to bitter women make pathetic accusations." Eliza turned and walked away, heart hammering. Adrian materialized beside her, taking her arm. "That," he said quietly, "was absolutely magnificent. I think I just made a powerful enemy. You made her look petty and small in front of witnesses. That's better than making an enemy. That's neutralizing one." They made it to the carriage. As soon as the door closed, Eliza started shaking. The adrenaline crash hit like a physical blow. "I hate this," she whispered. "I hate all of it. The fake smiles and the cruel questions and the constant judgment." Adrian pulled her close, and she let herself lean into him. His arms came around her, solid and warm. "I know," he said into her hair. "But you were incredible tonight. You didn't just survive, you conquered." "I don't feel like I conquered anything. I feel like I barely held myself together. That's what conquering looks like. Nobody feels confident while they're doing it." His hand stroked her back, soothing. "You were brave and fierce, and you didn't let them make you small. That's everything." Eliza closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of him, soap and wool and something underneath that was just Adrian. For the first time since entering the Wexford house, she felt safe. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we keep going, keep appearing together, keep looking united, keep making them question their own rumors." Adrian's voice was steady. "And we find out who's orchestrating this before they can do more damage." The carriage rolled through London streets. Eliza stayed in Adrian's arms, gathering strength for whatever came next. 3 days later, Catherine arrived at Blackthorn House with news that made everything worse. "I found the source," she said without preamble, sweeping into Adrian's study where he and Eliza were reviewing estate finances. "Or one of them, at least. You're not going to like it." "Tell me," Adrian said. "Your cousin, Edmund." The name landed like a bomb. Adrian went absolutely still, face draining of color. "Edmund is behind this?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "Not alone. He has backing, probably financial backing given the scope of the campaign. But yes, he's the primary orchestrator." Catherine's expression was grim. "It makes sense, actually. He's your heir presumptive. If your marriage is invalidated and you die without legitimate children, he inherits everything. He's trying to destroy my marriage so he can inherit the duchy." Adrian's hands clenched into fists. "That bastard!" Eliza felt cold spreading through her chest. "How much influence does he have?" "Enough. Edmund's well-connected, charming when he wants to be, and entirely without morals." Catherine looked between them. "And he's escalating. There's going to be a formal challenge. He's planning to petition the church court to investigate the marriage's legitimacy." "On what grounds?" Eliza demanded. "Coercion, fraud, irregular ceremony. He's throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. And he's got witnesses. People who'll swear the marriage looked suspicious, that you seemed reluctant, that the whole thing felt rushed and forced." Adrian was on his feet, pacing like a caged animal. "I'll destroy him." "You can't. Not directly. That would look like intimidation, which would support his case." Catherine's voice was urgent. "You need to fight this legally and socially. Prove the marriage is real and loving. Show that his claims are baseless." "How?" Eliza asked. "What proof could possibly satisfy them?" Catherine and Adrian exchanged glances. Something passed between them, some understanding that Eliza wasn't part of. "What?" she demanded. "What aren't you telling me?" Adrian stopped pacing, turning to face her. His expression was tortured. "There's one thing that would end this completely. One piece of evidence that would make Edmund's entire case collapse. Then we do it, whatever it is." "Eliza," Adrian's voice was gentle. "It's a child. If you were pregnant, or if we had a child, Edmund's claim would be meaningless. A legitimate heir would supersede him entirely." The words hung in the air. Eliza understood immediately, and the understanding made her feel sick. "You want me to get pregnant? To secure the succession?" "I'm not saying I want that. I'm saying it would solve the problem." "By turning me into a broodmare." Eliza's voice was shaking. "By reducing our marriage to biological function." "That's not—" Adrian ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I'm just explaining the reality. The reality is that Edmund challenges our marriage, and your solution is to consummate it for political advantage." Eliza stood, needing distance. "Do you hear yourself? Do you understand what you're asking?" "I'm not asking anything. I'm presenting options. Options that involve my body and my choices without any regard for what I might want." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Eliza laughed bitterly. "You sent me away for 9 months without explanation. You ignored every letter I wrote. You treated our marriage like a business transaction from the beginning. And now, when it's politically convenient, you want it to be real? You want intimacy and children and all the things you denied me from the start? I was wrong. Adrian's voice rose. I've admitted that. I've apologized. What more do you want? I want you to stop making decisions about my life. Eliza was shouting now, anger breaking through carefully maintained control. I want you to see me as a person, not a chess piece in your political games. I want... She stopped, breathing hard. The study was silent except for the crackling fire. What do you want? Adrian asked quietly. Eliza looked at him. This man she'd married as a stranger, who'd abandoned her, who'd returned asking for partnership but still thinking in terms of strategy and advantage. What did she want? I want a marriage that's real, she said finally. Not strategic, not political, real. But I don't know if you're capable of that. Adrian flinched like she'd struck him. That's what I'm trying to give you. No, you're trying to save your duchy. There's a difference. Before Adrian could respond, the study door burst open. Grimshaw stood there, face pale. Your Grace, both your Graces, there's been an incident. Someone broke into the estate office, papers scattered, files destroyed. He swallowed hard. And there's a message, painted on the wall. They followed him downstairs. The office was chaos, documents strewn everywhere, furniture overturned, years of carefully organized records destroyed. And on the wall, in red paint that looked disturbingly like blood, a message. The marriage is false. The Duchess is a lie. Eliza stared at the words, feeling ice settle in her stomach. This wasn't just political maneuvering anymore. Someone had broken into their home, destroyed their property, left a threatening message. Edmund wasn't just challenging their marriage. He was declaring war. Eliza stood in the destroyed office, staring at the blood-red words, while something inside her crystallized into pure, cold fury. Not fear, she'd expected Edmund to escalate. Not shock. Breaking into homes was exactly the kind of thing desperate people did. Just rage, clean and sharp as a blade. Get Catherine here, she said without turning around. And whoever handles your legal affairs. I want them both here within the hour. Adrian was beside her, close enough that she could feel the tension radiating from him. Eliza, within the hour, Adrian, this ends now. He left to send messages. Eliza walked slowly through the wreckage, cataloging damage with the same methodical focus she'd brought to Thornfield's failing infrastructure. Most of the scattered papers were financial records. Duplicates existed elsewhere. The furniture could be replaced. Even the threatening message was just paint on plaster. What mattered was the intent. Edmund had crossed a line from political maneuvering into direct intimidation, which meant he was either confident he could win or desperate enough not to care about consequences. Eliza was betting on desperate. She found Grimshaw hovering in the doorway. The servants who discovered this, where are they? Kitchen, Your Grace. Mary and Thomas. They came in to clean this morning and found that. Send them to me. And Grimshaw? Eliza met his eyes. I need complete honesty. What are the servants saying about all this? About the rumors, the marriage, everything? The butler's face was carefully neutral. There has been some discussion, Your Grace. I'm sure there has. What's the consensus? Grimshaw was quiet for a long moment. Then, the consensus is that you're different from other duchesses, that you've done things most ladies wouldn't, managing estates, dismissing agents, saving families from floods. Some find it admirable. Others find it suspicious. And which camp are you in? I find it refreshing, Your Grace, as do most of the staff who've actually met you. His expression softened slightly. If I may say so, whatever the truth of your marriage's origins, you've proven yourself worthy of the title. That counts for something. It was the longest speech Eliza had ever heard from Grimshaw, and the unexpected support made her throat tight. Thank you. Catherine arrived first, sweeping in with the energy of someone who'd been woken at an ungodly hour and was furious about it. She took one look at the office and swore creatively. Edmund's getting bold. That's either very good or very bad for us. She pulled out a notebook, already strategizing. We need to flip this. Turn it from an attack into a mistake that exposes him. How? Eliza asked. We make him overreach. Push him to do something so obviously improper that even his supporters can't defend it. Catherine's eyes were sharp. But that requires you to be bait. I'm already bait. He's already attacking. At least this way we control the circumstances. Adrian returned with a man Eliza didn't recognize. 50s, severe-looking, carrying a leather case that screamed legal professional. "Mr. Graves," Adrian said. "My solicitor." "Graves, my wife has some questions about church court proceedings." Graves set down his case and surveyed the damage with the detached interest of someone who'd seen worse. "Your Grace, I assume you want to know what we're facing?" "I want to know how to destroy Edmund's case so thoroughly that he never tries this again," Eliza said. Graves's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's refreshingly direct." "Very well. Edmund's petition to the church court alleges 3 things: coercion, fraudulent documentation, and irregular ceremony. To defeat it, we need to disprove all 3. "The documentation is solid," Adrian said. "I made sure of that." "The ceremony was proper," Eliza added. "Westminster Cathedral, licensed clergy, legal witnesses." "Then we focus on coercion. That's the hardest to disprove because it's subjective." Graves pulled papers from his case. "Edmund will produce witnesses who will claim you appeared reluctant, unhappy, forced into the marriage. We need to demonstrate that you entered it willingly and that your current relationship supports that." "Our current relationship is complicated," Eliza said dryly. "Church courts don't care about complicated. They care about appearances." Graves looked between them. "You need to appear devoted, unified, unquestionably married in every sense." There it was again, the suggestion that Eliza's body, her choices, her intimate life should be public evidence in a legal battle. She felt anger rising but pushed it down. Anger wasn't useful right now. Strategy was. "What if we flip the narrative entirely?" she asked. "Instead of defending against Edmund's accusations, what if we attack his credibility?" Catherine looked up sharply. "Go on." "Edmund's claim is that our marriage is false because it's unconventional. But what if we demonstrate that unconventional doesn't mean invalid? What if we show that I've been functioning as a duchess, successfully, while he's been scheming for an inheritance he doesn't deserve?" "That's defensive, not offensive," Graves said. "No, defensive would be proving I'm a good wife. Offensive is proving Edmund is a terrible heir." Eliza was thinking fast now, pieces clicking together. "Adrian, what would happen if you publicly named a different heir? Cut Edmund out of succession entirely?" Adrian went very still. "That would be unprecedented. Heirs presumptive aren't typically disinherited without cause. Breaking into a duke's home and threatening his wife seems like cause to me." "We can't prove Edmund did this," Catherine pointed out. "The message isn't signed." "Then we make him admit it. Or better, we make him do something even worse while people are watching." Eliza turned to Catherine. "You said we need to make him overreach. What would that look like?" Catherine's expression shifted into something predatory. "We throw a ball. A massive, very public ball celebrating your marriage. Invite everyone, supporters, enemies, neutral parties, make it impossible to ignore. Edmund will either have to attend and play nice, which undermines his case, or cause a scene, which proves he's irrational. Or he'll try to sabotage it," Adrian said, "which could backfire spectacularly if we're prepared." Eliza felt a smile spreading across her face. "We set a trap. Make ourselves such obvious targets that Edmund can't resist. And when he strikes, we're ready." Graves looked skeptical. "This is risky. If it goes wrong, you could hand him exactly the scandal he needs. If we do nothing, he gets that scandal anyway. At least this way we're in control." Eliza looked at Adrian. "Unless you have objections?" Adrian's expression was complicated. Surprise, maybe, and something that might have been pride. "No objections. When do we host this ball?" "As soon as possible," Catherine said, "before Edmund can file his formal petition. We need to establish the narrative first. Planning consumed the next week." Catherine handled the guest list with ruthless precision, ensuring every influential person in London received an invitation. Eliza managed logistics, catering, music, decorations, with the same organizational skill she'd brought to Thornfield. Adrian dealt with security, quietly hiring people to watch for sabotage attempts. They worked together with an intensity that left no room for the unresolved tension from their argument. During the day, they were colleagues executing a plan. At night, they retreated to separate bedrooms, Adrian in the master suite, Eliza in the Duchess's chambers, and pretended the arrangement didn't bother either of them. It bothered Eliza more than she wanted to admit. She'd go to bed alone in the massive four-poster and lie awake thinking about the conversation in the study, about Adrian's suggestion of a child, about whether he'd meant it strategically or if somewhere underneath the politics he actually wanted a real marriage, about whether she wanted that too. On the 5th day of preparations, a letter arrived from Thornfield. Eliza recognized Ashford's handwriting immediately and opened it with hands that suddenly felt unsteady. Your Grace, thought you should know, the winter wheat is coming in better than expected. Morrison's drainage is holding perfectly, and the Hendersons are settled into their temporary housing until we can rebuild. Young Tom asked after you yesterday, wanted to know when you're coming home. The moor's not the same without you. Turns out the place got used to having someone who gives a damn running things. Robert Ashford. Eliza read it twice, feeling homesick for a place she'd initially hated. Thornfield had been exile once. Now it felt like the only place she truly belonged. News from home? Adrian's voice made her jump. He'd entered the breakfast room silently, looking tired. He always looked tired these days, though his cough had improved. Ashford's update, the estate's doing well. That's good? Adrian poured coffee, not quite meeting her eyes. You must miss it. I do. London feels, Eliza searched for the word, hostile, like I'm performing constantly and one wrong move will prove everyone's suspicions right. You could go back, after this is resolved. The offer hung between them. Eliza set down the letter carefully. Is that what you want, me back at Thornfield? You in London, the same arrangement as before? I want you safe. If that means apart, then stop. Eliza's voice was sharper than intended. Stop making decisions based on what you think I need. What do you actually want, Adrian? For us? For this marriage? Adrian was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I want what we had those first 2 weeks at Thornfield. Working together, talking about drainage systems and crop rotation, arguing about tenant negotiations. I want to go to sleep knowing you're in the next room and wake up to coffee you've somehow made despite the fact that we have servants for that. I want... He stopped, jaw working. I want you. In every sense. But I don't know how to ask for that when I've already taken so much without asking. Eliza's chest felt tight. You could start by actually asking. Would you say yes? I don't know, but I'd at least have the choice. Before Adrian could respond, Grimshaw appeared in the doorway. Your Grace, there's a gentleman here to see you, Mr. Edmund Blackthorne. He says it's urgent. Eliza and Adrian exchanged glances. Edmund was here, actually here, in their home, bold as brass. Show him to the drawing room, Adrian said. We'll meet him there. Both of us, Eliza added. Together. Edmund Blackthorne was everything Eliza had expected and somehow worse. Late 30s, handsome in a dissolute way, with Adrian's coloring but none of his presence. He stood in the drawing room examining a painting with the casual arrogance of someone who already considered the place half his. Adrian. He turned, smile not reaching his eyes. And the mysterious Duchess. How delightful to finally meet you properly. Edmund. Adrian's voice was ice. You have 30 seconds to explain why you're in my house before I have you thrown out. So hostile. And here I came in good faith to discuss a family matter. Edmund's gaze slid to Eliza, assessing and dismissive in one look. Though perhaps we should speak privately. Some conversations aren't suitable for my wife? Adrian moved closer to Eliza, a united front. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of her. Edmund's expression flickered, irritation, quickly masked. Very well. I'm here to offer a compromise. Drop the pretense of this marriage, allow a quiet annulment, and I'll withdraw my petition. You can remarry properly, produce a legitimate heir, and we all move forward without scandal. That's generous, Eliza said flatly. Except for the part where our marriage is legitimate and your petition is baseless harassment. Is it? Edmund pulled a folded document from his jacket. I have sworn statements from 3 witnesses who attended your wedding. All testify that the bride appeared coerced. One claims to have heard her crying before the ceremony. I was nervous. That's not coercion. A judge might disagree. Edmund's smile turned sharp, especially when combined with evidence of your immediate separation and prolonged absence. It paints a picture of a woman married against her will and subsequently abandoned. Or a picture of a couple managing property holdings, Adrian said, which is what actually happened. Then explain why you're suddenly inseparable now, why this convenient reconciliation right as questions emerge. Edmund was clearly enjoying himself. It looks desperate, Adrian, like you're scrambling to make the marriage appear real because you know it isn't. Eliza felt anger building but kept her voice level. What do you actually want, Edmund? The truth, not the legal posturing. He looked at her with something close to respect. I want what's mine. The duchy should have passed to my father, but he died before your husband's father. I'm the rightful heir, and I'm tired of waiting for Adrian to acknowledge that. So you'll destroy lives to get it, break into homes, threaten women, fabricate evidence? I haven't fabricated anything. And as for the break-in, Edmund's smile widened. I have no idea what you're talking about, though I must say, the idea that someone would go to such lengths suggests you have enemies. Perhaps you should examine why that is. The denial was blatant and mocking. He wasn't even trying to hide that he'd done it, just making clear they couldn't prove it. Get out, Adrian said quietly. And Edmund, if you come to my house again uninvited, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Threatening a family member. How lovely. Edmund moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, one more thing. This ball you're planning, I'll be attending, with guests. We're all very curious to see this grand demonstration of marital devotion. He left. Eliza waited until his footsteps faded before letting out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. He's worse than I imagined, she said. He's confident, which means he thinks he's going to win. Adrian was staring at the door, expression dark. We need to make sure that doesn't happen. The ball was 3 days away. Eliza threw herself into final preparations with single-minded focus, grateful for something concrete to control. But underneath the planning, anxiety churned. This event would either vindicate them or provide Edmund with exactly the ammunition he needed. Catherine appeared on the second day with intelligence. Edmund's bringing a crowd. I've identified at least 12 people on his guest list who are positioned to witness and testify to anything irregular. He's planning something. We expected that, Eliza said. The question is what? My guess. He'll try to provoke a confrontation, make Adrian lose his temper publicly, or get you to say something that sounds coerced, create a scene that supports his narrative. Catherine's expression was serious. You both need to be perfect, calm, united, unshakable. No pressure, Eliza muttered. The night before the ball, Eliza couldn't sleep. She paced her bedroom in her nightgown, mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. Around midnight, she gave up and went downstairs to the library, seeking distraction in books. Adrian was already there, sitting in front of the dying fire with a glass of whiskey. He looked up when she entered, surprised. Can't sleep either? He asked. Too much thinking. Eliza sat in the other chair, curling her feet under her. Are we insane? Throwing a party while Edmund plots to destroy us? Possibly, but it's too late to back out now. Adrian gestured to the whiskey decanter. Want some? It doesn't help, but it feels like it should. Eliza accepted a glass, sipping the burning liquid. They sat in silence for several minutes, watching firelight flicker. I'm sorry, Adrian said finally. For earlier. The comment about you going back to Thornfield. I wasn't trying to push you away. I was trying to give you an out. I don't want an out. I want... Eliza stopped, uncertain how to articulate it. I want to fight for this. Whatever this is or could be. But I can't do that alone. You're not alone. Adrian set down his glass, leaning forward. Eliza, I know I've handled everything badly. The marriage, the separation, the return, all of it. But I'm asking now, properly asking. Do you want this marriage to be real? Not strategic, not political, real. Eliza looked at him in the firelight, seeing exhaustion and vulnerability and something that might have been hope. This man who'd sent her away to protect her, who'd returned sick and uncertain, who was trying clumsily to build something genuine from wreckage. Yes, she said, I want it to be real. But real means honest. It means you don't make decisions for me. It means we're equals, actually equals, not just theoretically. I can do that. I will do that. Adrian's voice was fierce. I promise. Then ask me again, the question you asked before. Adrian understood immediately. He stood, moving to kneel in front of her chair, a reversal of every traditional proposal Eliza had ever heard of. He took her hand, holding it carefully like something precious. Eliza Whitmore, Duchess of Blackthorn, woman who saved families from floods and rebuilt dying estates, would you do me the extraordinary honor of making this marriage real? Of being my partner in every sense, my equal in all things, my... Eliza kissed him, just leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, cutting off the formal speech because she couldn't wait another second. Adrian made a surprised sound, then kissed her back, his hands coming up to frame her face. It wasn't smooth or practiced. Their teeth clicked slightly, and Eliza's angle was awkward from the chair, and Adrian was still kneeling, which couldn't be comfortable. But it was real, finally real. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Eliza rested her forehead against Adrian's. Yes. My answer is yes. Thank God. Adrian's laugh was shaky. I was terrified you'd say no. I was terrified you wouldn't ask. They stayed like that for a long moment, just breathing together. Then Adrian stood, pulling Eliza up with him. Come with me. Where? Upstairs, to my room, unless you'd prefer yours or somewhere else entirely, or... Eliza kissed him again to stop the nervous babbling. Your room is fine. They made it halfway up the stairs before doubts hit. Eliza stopped, Adrian nearly running into her. What if this is a mistake, she asked. What if we're just reacting to stress and tomorrow we regret... Eliza. Adrian turned her to face him. I've regretted almost every decision I've made regarding you. Marrying you without explanation, sending you away, staying away so long. But I will never regret this. Even if everything else falls apart tomorrow, I won't regret tonight. It was exactly what she needed to hear. Eliza took his hand and they continued up. The morning of the ball arrived with gray skies that threatened rain. Eliza woke in Adrian's bed, their bed now, she supposed, feeling more settled than she had in months. Adrian was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with an expression that made her blush. Stop looking at me like that, she said. We have approximately 12 hours before we have to face all of London society. I'm not looking at you any particular way. You absolutely are. You look smug. Can you blame me? Adrian's smile was warm. I woke up with you in my arms. I'm allowed to be smug. Eliza swatted him with a pillow but couldn't suppress her own smile. We still have to get through tonight. We will, together. Adrian caught her hand, suddenly serious. Whatever Edmund tries, whatever happens, we're in this together now. Equals, partners. Promise? Promise. The ballroom at Blackthorn House had been transformed. Crystal chandeliers blazed with candlelight. Hothouse flowers covered every surface, despite the autumn chill. Musicians tuned instruments in the corner. It looked like every other London ball Eliza had heard about, but never attended. Beautiful, expensive, designed to impress. She stood at the entrance in a gown Catherine had helped select. Deep green silk that brought out her eyes, cut in the latest fashion, but not so daring as to invite scandal. Her hair was arranged elaborately, woven with pearls that had belonged to Adrian's mother. She looked like a duchess. She felt like an imposter. Stop fidgeting, Catherine murmured beside her. You look perfect. I look terrified. Same thing at these events. Catherine adjusted Eliza's sleeve minutely. Remember, you're not here to prove anything to these people. You're here to show Edmund that he's already lost. Adrian appeared resplendent in formal evening wear. He took Eliza's arm, squeezing gently. Ready? No, but let's do it anyway. Guests began arriving in a flood of silk and jewels and barely concealed curiosity. Eliza and Adrian stood together greeting them, presenting a united front. Some people were genuinely warm, the Marchioness of Wexford surprisingly, and several others who seemed pleased to see them. Others were coldly formal, clearly reserving judgment. Edmund arrived fashionably late with his entourage, a dozen people who all looked vaguely predatory. He bowed to Eliza with exaggerated courtesy. Your Grace, what a magnificent event. You've outdone yourself. Thank you for coming, Eliza said, not meaning it. Wouldn't miss it for the world. After all, it's not every day one sees such a demonstration of devotion. The emphasis on demonstration made his skepticism clear. Adrian's hand tightened on Eliza's arm, but his voice remained level. Enjoy the evening, Edmund. The dancing began. Adrian led Eliza onto the floor for the first waltz, holding her properly, but with enough familiarity that anyone watching could see they were comfortable together. Eliza focused on the steps, hyper-aware of eyes tracking their every move. "You're doing perfectly," Adrian murmured. "I'm barely breathing." "That's less perfect. Try breathing." Despite the tension, Eliza found herself almost enjoying the dance. Adrian was a good lead, confident but not controlling. And there was something satisfying about moving together so publicly, demonstrating the partnership they'd built. The waltz ended to polite applause. Other couples took the floor. Eliza and Adrian circulated, making conversation, playing their parts. Everything was going smoothly, too smoothly. An hour into the ball, Edmund made his move. He intercepted Eliza near the refreshment table while Adrian was across the room in conversation with a parliamentary colleague. "A moment of your time, Your Grace." Edmund's smile was predatory. "I'm rather busy. I insist it's about your marriage. Specifically, the interesting discovery my investigator made regarding the ceremony." Eliza felt her stomach drop, but kept her expression neutral. "What discovery?" "The witnesses who signed your marriage certificate. One of them, a Mr. Thomas Whitley, doesn't actually exist. The name appears nowhere in London records. No birth certificate, no death record, no property holdings. Nothing." Edmund's voice carried just enough to attract nearby attention. "Which raises the question. If your witness was fabricated, what else about the ceremony was false?" People were turning now, conversations fading as they sensed drama. Eliza saw Adrian across the room, starting toward them, but he was too far to intervene immediately. "That's impossible," Eliza said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I saw him sign the certificate myself." "Did you? Or did you see someone you assumed was Thomas Whitley sign a name you assumed was his?" Edmund was speaking louder now, ensuring everyone could hear. "Because, according to legal records, no such person exists, which means your marriage certificate contains false testimony, which means it's invalid." The room had gone silent. Every eye was on them. This was Edmund's play, public accusation in front of witnesses, forcing them to defend or look guilty. Eliza's mind raced. She didn't know who the witnesses had been, hadn't paid attention at a ceremony she'd been too nervous and miserable to focus on. Edmund could be lying, or he could be telling the truth about a genuine error. Either way, denying it made her look defensive. Accepting it gave him ammunition. So she did neither. "That's an interesting claim," she said clearly, projecting so the entire ballroom could hear. "Tell me, Edmund, how much did you pay your investigator to fabricate this evidence? Because I'm genuinely curious about the going rate for perjury these days." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Edmund's face flushed. "I fabricated nothing." "No? Then produce this investigator. Let's hear his testimony directly. In fact," Eliza raised her voice further, "let's examine all the evidence. The sworn statements you claim to have, the witnesses who allegedly saw coercion, the proof of any irregularity you've alleged. Let's air everything publicly, right now, in front of all these people." Edmund's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Because I have nothing to hide. My marriage is legal and legitimate, but you—" Eliza stepped closer, voice dropping to something icier. "You've broken into homes, destroyed property, threatened women, and now you're making accusations based on evidence no one else has seen. So by all means, Edmund, produce your proof, or admit you're making desperate accusations to steal an inheritance you don't deserve." The crowd was riveted. Adrian had reached them now, positioning himself beside Eliza. Support, not rescue. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. His presence said everything. They were together in this. Edmund looked between them, calculating. The silence stretched. Then, "The evidence speaks for itself. I don't need to justify it to you or anyone else." But his voice had lost its confidence. He was retreating. "Then you have nothing," Eliza said flatly. "No proof, no evidence, just lies and desperation, and everyone here can see it." She turned her back on him deliberately. The cut direct, Catherine had called it, the ultimate social snub. Adrian followed her lead. They walked away from Edmund together, leaving him standing alone while the ballroom buzzed with whispers. Catherine materialized beside them as they reached the edge of the crowd. "That was absolutely magnificent." "That was terrifying," Eliza corrected. Is what he said about the witness true? I don't know, but it doesn't matter now. You called his bluff and made him look petty in front of half of London. Catherine's smile was fierce. He's lost the room. Look. Eliza looked. People were staring at Edmund with open skepticism. The Marchioness of Wexford was speaking to a group nearby, and from her gestures and their reactions, she was clearly defending Eliza. Other conversations were happening in clusters, people reassessing, recalculating their positions. They're questioning him, Catherine said, wondering why a man who claims to have evidence won't produce it, wondering what his real motives are. You've planted doubt. That's not enough, Adrian said. Edmund won't back down just because one confrontation didn't go his way. No, but it's a start. Catherine glanced around the ballroom. Keep circulating, keep looking confident. Make them see that you're stronger than his accusations. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. Eliza smiled and danced and made conversation while her mind spun. She'd won the confrontation, but the question about the witness remained. If Edmund was telling the truth about that, if there really was an error in the marriage certificate, it could still provide grounds for annulment regardless of how the social battle played out. It was nearly midnight when a commotion at the entrance announced new arrivals. Eliza turned to see who had come so late and felt her breath catch. Robert Ashford walked into the ballroom looking deeply uncomfortable in formal wear but determined. Behind him came Mrs. Henderson holding her baby, Mr. Crawford and his wife, Morrison and his daughter, and impossibly, Mrs. Briggs in a black dress that must have been her finest. The Thornfield tenants. Here. In London. What? Eliza couldn't form words. Ashford spotted her and made his way through the crowd, others following. He stopped in front of Eliza and bowed awkwardly. Your Grace, hope you don't mind us crashing your party, but we heard there was some question about your character. Thought we should set the record straight. I don't understand, Eliza managed. How did you— Lady Catherine sent word, Mrs. Henderson said, shifting the baby to her other hip. Said you needed people who could testify about the kind of person you are. Well, we can do that. Morrison stepped forward. This Duchess saved my farm from ruin. Implemented drainage that actually works, negotiated fair rents, treated me like a partner instead of property. That's not the behavior of someone in a false marriage. She walked into floodwater to save my family, Mrs. Henderson added, voice shaking slightly but firm. Risked her own life without hesitation. That's courage. That's character. One by one, the tenants spoke. About Eliza's work at Thornfield, about improvements she'd implemented, about lives she'd changed. They spoke with the authenticity of people who had no stake in London politics, just honest testimony from people whose lives she'd touched. The ballroom had gone completely silent. Eliza felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. She looked at Catherine, who was smiling. I thought you might need character witnesses, Catherine said quietly. Turns out you had them all along. They just needed transportation. Eliza wanted to hug her, wanted to hug all of them. These people who'd traveled 300 miles to defend her reputation. Instead, she turned to the crowd. These are the people of Thornfield Estate, she said clearly, the families I've had the honor of working with for the past year. They know me not as a duchess or a political piece, but as someone who shares their work and their lives. If anyone questions the legitimacy of my marriage or my character, I invite them to speak with these people. They'll tell you the truth. It was the final blow to Edmund's case, not legal evidence. The tenants couldn't testify about the wedding ceremony they hadn't attended, but social evidence, powerful and undeniable. Character witnesses who made Eliza real in a way no legal document could. Edmund left shortly after, his entourage trailing behind him looking uncertain. He didn't make a scene or issue threats, just departed silently, and somehow that felt like the clearest admission of defeat. The ball continued for another hour before guests began departing. Eliza stood at the entrance with Adrian, accepting congratulations and well wishes that felt genuinely warm now. The tide had turned. She could feel it. When the last guests had gone, Eliza found herself in the ballroom surrounded by her Thornfield tenants. Ashford was examining a chandelier with the critical eye he brought to everything. Fancy, he said, but inefficient. Candles need constant replacement. Eliza laughed. Actually laughed, tension draining away. Robert Ashford criticizing London lighting. I never thought I'd see the day. Someone's got to maintain standards. But his expression was warm. You did good tonight, Your Grace. Made us proud. You came all this way, for me. You saved my neighbors. Rebuilt an estate everyone else had given up on. Treated us like people instead of problems. Ashford shrugged. Seemed like the least we could do was return the favor. Mrs. Henderson approached, baby sleeping against her shoulder. We should probably head to whatever lodgings Lady Catherine arranged. But Your Grace, thank you for everything. Not just tonight, but everything. I should be thanking you. You didn't have to come. Yes, we did. Mrs. Henderson's smile was gentle. You're our Duchess. We take care of our own. After the tenants had been escorted to their lodgings, Eliza and Adrian finally retreated to their rooms. Eliza's feet ached from dancing and her head throbbed from tension, but she felt lighter than she had in weeks. We did it, she said, collapsing onto the bed, still in her ball gown. We actually did it. You did it. Adrian sat beside her, pulling off his cravat with relief. That confrontation with Edmund, the way you called his bluff, that was all you. I had no idea if I was right. Neither did he. That's what made it work. Adrian's expression was soft. You're extraordinary, you know that? Eliza felt herself blushing. I'm exhausted and my feet hurt, and I'm probably going to have nightmares about Edmund for weeks. Extraordinary and human. Even better. Adrian helped her up, beginning to unfasten the complicated buttons down her back. For what it's worth, watching you tonight, commanding that room, defending our marriage, standing up to Edmund without flinching, I've never been more certain that I made the right choice. What choice? Marrying you, asking you to make it real, all of it. The last button came free, and Eliza's dress loosened. You're the partner I didn't know I needed. Eliza turned to face him, still in her undergarments. We're not done yet. Edmund won't give up just because one party went badly. No, but we've shifted the narrative, made people question his motives, demonstrated that our marriage is real and functioning. Adrian cupped her face gently. That's more than I hoped for. I hoped for more than survival, Eliza said. I hoped for victory. Then we'll get you victory. Adrian kissed her forehead. Together. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time since arriving in London, Eliza dreamed of Thornfield without feeling homesick. Because wherever Adrian was, wherever they stood together, that was becoming home too. 2 days later, Edmund's formal petition was withdrawn. No explanation given, just a terse note from his solicitor stating that upon further review, the evidence was insufficient to proceed. Catherine brought the news personally, waving the document like a trophy. He's done. Publicly defeated and legally neutered. Whatever happens with the duchy succession now, it won't be because he challenged your marriage. Eliza took the paper, reading it 3 times to make sure it was real. Just like that? He gives up? He ran out of options. His evidence couldn't withstand scrutiny. His social standing took a hit from the ball. And most importantly, Catherine's smile was sharp. Several of his financial backers pulled their support after witnessing your tenant testimonials. Turns out, investing in someone trying to destroy a duchess who saves families from floods is bad optics. So we won, Adrian said slowly. Actually, won. You won. Catherine looked between them. Though I'd say the victory was inevitable the moment you two stopped pretending and started actually partnering. Turns out real marriages are harder to destroy than fake ones. After Catherine left, Eliza and Adrian stood in the study, the same room where they'd argued about children and strategy, holding the withdrawal notice. What happens now? Eliza asked. Now we decide what we want. Adrian set down the paper. Edmund's neutralized. The political situation is stabilizing. You could return to Thornfield if you wanted, or stay here, or we could divide time between both. For once, the choice is actually ours. Eliza thought about it. London with its hostility and scrutiny, Thornfield with its peace and purpose. The choice should be obvious. But looking at Adrian, at this man who'd grown from cold stranger to genuine partner, she realized the location mattered less than the company. I want both, she said. Thornfield is my work, my achievement. I won't abandon it. But London is where you are, where we need to be sometimes. So, both. We split our time, manage both estates, build something that spans the distance. That sounds exhausting. Everything worth doing is exhausting. Eliza smiled. But we're good at exhausting work. We are. Adrian pulled her close, resting his chin on her head. Partners. Equals. In everything. It wasn't a perfect ending. Edmund was still out there, still a threat if diminished. London society would always have opinions. The marriage that had started as transaction would require constant work to maintain as partnership. But standing in Adrian's arms, holding proof of their victory, Eliza felt something she hadn't felt since her wedding day. Certainty. They'd built this together, the defense, the strategy, the real relationship underneath the legal arrangement. And what they'd built could withstand whatever came next. Outside, London carried on its noisy, complicated way. But inside Blackthorn House, for the first time since Eliza had entered it as a bride, there was peace. The red paint was still wet. It dripped down the wall in slow rivulets, pooling on the floor like accusations made physical. Eliza stood frozen, staring at the words while her mind raced through implications. When did this happen? Adrian's voice was controlled, but she could hear the fury underneath. Sometime in the last hour, Your Grace, Grimshaw said, wringing his hands. The servants heard nothing. The window was forced. There, you can see the broken latch. Adrian moved to examine the window, careful not to disturb potential evidence. Eliza forced herself to look away from the wall and survey the damage. Estate records scattered everywhere, tenant agreements torn, financial ledgers, months of careful documentation, destroyed. They were looking for something specific, she said, crouching to gather papers. This isn't random vandalism. Someone wanted to find documentation about the estate, about us. Edmund. Adrian's face was stone. He's trying to find ammunition, anything he can twist to support his claims. Did he find it? Catherine appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. What documents were kept here? Eliza mentally catalogued what had been in the office. Estate finances, tenant records, property deeds, nothing about the marriage itself. Those documents are with your solicitor, aren't they? She looked at Adrian. Yes. Marriage license, settlement agreements, everything legally significant is in Whitmore's office. This, he gestured at the chaos. This is intimidation. Effective intimidation, Catherine said grimly. Breaking into a duke's residence? That's bold. It means Edmund has resources and support we haven't accounted for. Eliza stood, still holding torn papers. Her hands had stopped shaking. Instead of fear, she felt something sharper crystallizing in her chest, the same cold focus that had gotten her through winter at Thornfield. We need to go on offense, she said. Adrian looked at her. What do you mean? We've been reacting, defending, playing by their rules. Eliza set down the papers, mind working through possibilities. But Edmund's attacking because he thinks we're vulnerable. What if we prove we're not? How? Catherine asked. By doing exactly what you said, making the marriage so obviously real that his claims look desperate. Eliza turned to Adrian. You said we need to prove our marriage is legitimate, so let's prove it, publicly, thoroughly, in ways that can't be disputed. We've been attending events. That's not enough. Anyone can smile at parties. Eliza paced, ideas forming. We need witnesses who will testify to the marriage's validity, people whose word carries weight, and we need to demonstrate that this marriage has substance, shared property, joint decisions, actual partnership. Adrian was watching her with something like fascination. What are you proposing? First, we get sworn statements from everyone at the wedding. The priest, the witnesses, anyone present. Legal documentation that the ceremony was proper and legitimate. Eliza ticked items off on her fingers. Second, we publicly transfer assets. Make me a formal co-owner of estates and properties. Show that you trust me with your wealth. That this is a real partnership, not a political arrangement. Edmund will claim that's fabricated after the fact, Catherine interjected. Maybe. But it creates a paper trail that contradicts his narrative. And third, Eliza stopped pacing, looking directly at Adrian. We invite scrutiny. Host an open gathering at Thornfield. Let people see what we've built there. Let the tenants speak to how we've worked together. Turn the investigation Edmund wants into our advantage. The silence in the destroyed office was profound. That's brilliant, Catherine said finally. Risky as hell, but brilliant. If you can pull it off, you don't just defend against Edmund's claims. You dismantle them entirely. Can we pull it off? Eliza asked Adrian. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. You're sure about this? Inviting London society to Thornfield, opening our lives to inspection. It's the opposite of the protection I tried to give you. I don't want protection. I want to win. Eliza held his gaze. And I can't win by hiding. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. Then we do it. All of it. We turn this into the fight Edmund didn't expect. They worked through the night. Catherine drafted a list of every person who'd attended the wedding, cross-referencing against current London residents. Adrian sent urgent messages to his solicitor about property transfers and legal documentation. Eliza planned the Thornfield gathering with the same strategic precision she'd brought to estate management, guest lists, logistics, messaging. By dawn, they had a plan. It was aggressive and risky and required perfect execution, but it was theirs. We'll need to move fast, Catherine said, reviewing their notes over breakfast. Edmund's formal petition to the church court is scheduled for next week. We need our evidence assembled before then. The property transfers can be completed in 3 days, Adrian said. I've instructed Whitmore to prioritize. But the wedding witnesses, some of them may be difficult to locate. I'll handle that. Catherine stood, already moving. You two focus on Thornfield. Send invitations today. Make it clear this isn't optional. Anyone who matters needs to be there. She left. Eliza found herself alone with Adrian for the first time since their argument in the study. The tension between them was still present, unresolved. About what I said yesterday, Adrian started. Don't. Eliza held up a hand. We don't have time for that conversation right now. First we deal with Edmund, then we deal with us. Eliza, I mean it, Adrian. I can't fight on multiple fronts. Either you trust me as a partner in this or you don't. But I can't also be managing your guilt and my anger while we're trying to save our marriage from legal destruction. He looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he just nodded. All right, partners first, everything else later. Partners, Eliza agreed. They spent the day sending invitations, carefully worded summons to a celebration of estate improvements at Thornfield. The subtext was clear. This was where the Duke and Duchess would make their stand. Attendance would be noted. Absence would be remembered. By evening, acceptances were already arriving. The Marchioness of Wexford, Lord Halifax, even Lady Ashcroft, probably unable to resist the opportunity to witness potential scandal. Good. Let them all come. Let them see. 3 days later, the property transfer documents were ready. Adrian's solicitor, a nervous man named Whitmore who looked like he hadn't slept, brought them to Blackthorn House personally. This is highly irregular, Your Grace, Whitmore said, spreading papers across Adrian's desk. Transferring this level of assets to the Duchess, it's essentially making her an equal owner of your entire estate portfolio. That's the point, Adrian said. But if the marriage were to be annulled, it won't be. And if someone tries, this makes it exponentially more difficult. Adrian picked up the papers, scanning the legal language. Everything's in order? Yes, Your Grace, though I must advise, your advice is noted and ignored. Where do I sign? They executed the documents that afternoon, with Whitmore and 2 other solicitors serving as witnesses. Eliza watched as Adrian signed away half his fortune to her. No conditions, no protections, just a clean transfer of ownership. Why? She asked when the solicitors had left. This goes beyond what we need for appearances. You're actually making me wealthy in my own right. Because you've earned it. And because if I die or if something happens, I want you protected. Adrian set down the pen. This isn't strategy, Eliza. This is me acknowledging reality. You're not my dependent. You're my equal. The legal documents should reflect that. Eliza looked at the papers, her name now attached to properties and investments worth more than she could fully comprehend. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like responsibility. Edmund's going to claim this proves his case, she said, that we're scrambling to manufacture legitimacy. Let him. He'll have to explain why a man supposedly engaged in marriage fraud would give his wife irrevocable ownership of half his wealth. Adrian's smile was sharp. That's not how fraud works. Catherine's investigation bore fruit the next day. She arrived at breakfast with a folder thick with sworn statements. I found them, she said, dropping the folder on the table with satisfaction. Every witness from your wedding. The priest, the church wardens, even the couple who were getting married right after you and saw the ceremony. Eliza opened the folder, scanning the statements. Each one testified to the same facts. The marriage had been legal, proper, and consensual. The bride had seemed nervous but willing. The groom had been formal but clear. No signs of coercion or irregularity. "This is good," Adrian said, reading over her shoulder. "This directly contradicts Edmund's claims." "It gets better." Catherine's smile was predatory. "I also found Edmund's financial backer, Lord Markham, one of your old political enemies from the banking scandal. He's been funding Edmund's entire campaign, hoping to destroy you through proxy." "Markham." Adrian's expression darkened. "That makes sense. He's wanted revenge for years. And now we can prove conspiracy. Edmund isn't acting alone. He's a paid agent of your political enemies. That undermines his credibility entirely." Catherine accepted tea from a servant, looking pleased. "We present this at Thornfield, along with your property transfers and wedding testimony, and Edmund's case collapses." "If we can get the church court to accept the evidence," Eliza said. "Oh, they'll accept it, especially when presented at a public gathering with half of London society watching." Catherine's eyes gleamed. "Which is why the Thornfield event is crucial. We're not just defending your marriage, we're putting Edmund on trial." The journey north was different this time. Instead of fleeing London, they were preparing for battle. The carriage was crammed with documents, evidence, and strategic plans. Adrian spent hours drilling Eliza on potential questions, hostile scenarios, ways the gathering could go wrong. "Stop," she finally said on the third day. "You're making me more nervous, not less. I'm trying to prepare you. I survived a winter at Thornfield with no help and a crumbling estate. I think I can handle some hostile questions from London aristocrats." Eliza set aside the papers. "What I need from you isn't more preparation. It's trust that I can handle this." Adrian was quiet. Then, "You're right. I'm sorry, old habits." "What old habits?" "Trying to control everything. Trying to plan for every contingency." He looked out the window at the passing countryside. "Trying to protect people by managing them instead of trusting them." "You can't manage me, Adrian. I'm not controllable." "I'm beginning to understand that." His smile was slight but genuine. "It's terrifying." "Good. Terrifying means you're paying attention." They reached Thornfield on a gray afternoon that threatened rain but held off. The house looked different than when Eliza had first arrived. Still old, still weathered, but alive. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys. The windows gleamed from recent cleaning. The drive had been cleared and improved. Mrs. Briggs met them at the entrance, looking stressed but determined. "Your Graces, everything's ready. Rooms prepared for 30 guests, food ordered from every farm within 10 miles, and Ashford's organized the tenants for tomorrow's presentations." "Tomorrow?" Eliza asked. "The tenants want to speak about the improvements, the changes you've made." They heard what this gathering was really about and insisted on participating. Mrs. Briggs's expression softened. "They're loyal to you, Your Grace. All of them." Eliza felt her throat tighten. "Thank you, Mrs. Briggs." The guests began arriving the next morning. Carriages rolled up the drive in a steady stream. London society transplanted to the moor, bringing their jewels and judgment and barely concealed curiosity. Eliza greeted each arrival personally, refusing to hide or show weakness. The Marchioness of Wexford came first, surveying Thornfield with sharp eyes. "Impressive," she said. "I'd heard you'd made changes, but this is substantial." "Thank you, Your Grace." "Don't thank me yet. Half these people are here hoping to witness your downfall. Prove them wrong." By afternoon, the house was full. 30 guests, plus servants, plus the tenants who'd gathered outside waiting for their turn to speak. The drawing room buzzed with conversation, some genuinely curious about the estate, others clearly hunting for scandal. And then Edmund arrived. He swept in during tea, fashionably late and dramatically positioned. Edmund Blackthorne was younger than Adrian, mid-30s, handsome in a dissolute way, dressed with expensive carelessness. He smiled at the assembled guests like he owned the room. "Cousin," he said, spotting Adrian, "how domestic you've become. And this must be the famous Duchess." His eyes landed on Eliza, assessing and dismissive. "Charming." "Edmund." Adrian's voice was ice. "I'm surprised you came. Wouldn't miss it. After all, this gathering is essentially about me, isn't it? About my very reasonable questions regarding the legitimacy of this marriage." He accepted wine from a servant, playing to his audience. I'm simply seeking truth. Surely that's not objectionable. Truth, Eliza said quietly. Is that what you call breaking into our London residence, destroying property, leaving threatening messages? The room went silent. Edmund's smile didn't falter. I have no idea what you're referring to. Don't you? How convenient. Eliza stepped forward, forcing him to look directly at her. You've spent months spreading rumors and lies about our marriage, questioned its legitimacy, suggested fraud, even filed formal petitions with the church court, all while claiming to seek truth. The irregularities in your marriage are well documented. There are no irregularities. There's a legal marriage properly executed with witnesses and documentation. What there is, however, is a man desperate to inherit a duchy who's willing to destroy people's lives to get it. Edmund's face flushed. You dare accuse me? I dare state facts. Eliza pulled out the folder Catherine had prepared. We have sworn testimony from every witness at our wedding. Legal documentation of the ceremony's validity. Financial records showing joint ownership and partnership, not the kind of arrangements made in fraudulent marriages. She handed papers to the nearest guest, Lord Halifax, who began reading with interest. We also have evidence that your campaign has been funded by Lord Markham, my husband's political enemy. This isn't about truth, Edmund. It's about revenge by proxy. That's absurd. Then explain the bank transfers. Catherine? Eliza looked to where Catherine stood near the window. Catherine produced another folder. Documented payments from Markham to Edmund. £15,000 over 6 months. Generous funding for what Edmund claims is a personal concern about family legitimacy. The whispers started immediately. Guests passing papers between them, reading testimony and financial records. Eliza could see the tide shifting. What had been curiosity about scandal was transforming into recognition of Edmund's manipulation. This proves nothing, Edmund said, but his voice had lost certainty. You could have fabricated all of it? The wedding witnesses, the financial transfers, the testimony from our tenants about how we've worked together to rebuild this estate? Eliza shook her head. That would require a conspiracy far more elaborate than a simple marriage, which is more likely that we staged all of this or that you're lying. Edmund opened his mouth, but before he could respond, the drawing room door opened. Ashford entered, followed by Mr. Crawford, Mrs. Henderson, and several other tenant farmers. Begging your pardon, your graces, Ashford said, but we were told we could speak. Adrian nodded. Please. Mr. Crawford stepped forward, cap in his hands, addressing the assembled London society with the blunt honesty of someone who had no patience for games. I'm John Crawford, farm the North property, and I'm here to tell you that Her Grace, the Duchess, she saved this estate. How? Someone in the crowd asked. By doing actual work. When she arrived, Thornfield was dying. Tenants leaving, farms failing, land agents stealing from everyone. She could have ignored it, stayed in the manor, waited for things to collapse. Instead, she learned. Asked questions, studied farming, visited every property, dismissed the corrupt agent, reorganized our systems, helped us improve our yields. Mrs. Henderson spoke next, holding her baby, the same child Eliza had carried across the flood. Her Grace risked her life to save my family. Our cottage was flooding, the building collapsing. She walked into that water herself, carried my baby across. That's not someone playing at being a duchess. That's someone who treats us like we matter. One by one, the tenants spoke, told stories of improvements, support, genuine care. Painted a picture of a woman who'd transformed a dying estate through competence and courage. Not for show, not for London society, but because it was the right thing to do. By the time they finished, the drawing room was silent. Eliza could see the calculation happening in every face. This wasn't the narrative Edmund had promised them. This was something else entirely. These are touching stories, Edmund said, recovering his composure. But they don't address the fundamental questions about the marriage itself. About why the Duke sent his bride away immediately after the wedding. About the 9 months of separation that suggest... Suggest what? Adrian's voice cut through the room like a blade. He stood, moving to stand beside Eliza. That I made a mistake? I did. I handled our marriage poorly from the beginning, sent Eliza away thinking I was protecting her, when really I was being a coward. The admission rippled through the crowd. Edmund looked shocked that Adrian would confess to anything. But here's what actually happened, Adrian continued. I married Eliza because I needed a duchess, and she needed security. It was transactional. I won't pretend otherwise. But what I didn't expect was who she would become, what she would accomplish, how she would take a responsibility I'd abandoned and turn it into something extraordinary. He turned to Eliza, and his eyes were steady. I sent you away and you built an empire. You took Thornfield from ruin and made it profitable, made it matter. You earned the respect of every person on this estate through work and courage. And somewhere in that process, this stopped being a transaction and became something real. Eliza's breath caught. This wasn't planned. This wasn't strategic. This was Adrian speaking truth in front of everyone, making himself vulnerable in ways that political animals never did. So yes, he said, still looking at her. Our marriage started unconventionally. Yes, I made terrible decisions in how I handled it. But what we have now, what we've built together, that's legitimate. That's real. And anyone who suggests otherwise can examine the evidence, speak to the witnesses, review the documentation. They'll find the same thing. A marriage that's evolved into partnership. Two people who've learned to trust each other through work and adversity. The room was absolutely silent. Edmund looked like he wanted to speak but couldn't find words. Even the hostile faces in the crowd had softened into something approaching respect. I have one more thing to present, Eliza said quietly. She pulled out the final document, the property transfer papers. 3 days ago, my husband transferred joint ownership of his entire estate portfolio to me. No conditions, no protections for himself. Just an equal partnership, legally recognized. She handed the papers to the Marchioness of Wexford, who read them with raised eyebrows. This is extraordinary and legally binding. Completely binding, Eliza confirmed. Which means if our marriage were fraudulent, as Edmund claims, my husband just gave half his fortune to a con artist. Does that sound like the action of someone engaged in fraud? The Marchioness actually laughed. No, it sounds like the action of a man who's either very much in love or very stupid, and Blackthorn's never been stupid. The tension in the room broke. People began talking, examining documents, asking questions of the tenants. The narrative was shifting decisively away from Edmund's accusations toward recognition of what Eliza and Adrian had actually built. Edmund saw it happening, saw his case crumbling in real time. This is manipulation, he said desperately. They've staged all of this. Oh, shut up, Edmund, the Marchioness's voice cut through his protest. You've lost. The evidence is overwhelming, the witness is credible, and you've been exposed as a paid agent of political revenge. If you had any dignity, you'd withdraw your petition and apologize. I will not. Then you'll be destroyed. Catherine stepped forward, her voice cold. We have documentation of everything, your financial arrangements with Markham, the rumors you've spread, even the break-in at Blackthorn House. Yes, we have evidence tying you to that too. You can withdraw gracefully, or we can pursue criminal charges. Your choice. Edmund looked around the room, finding no allies, no support. His face went through a series of expressions, rage, fear, calculation, before settling on defeat. This isn't over, he said, but the words had no weight. Yes, it is. Adrian's voice was final. You're cut off, Edmund. No more allowance from the duchy, no more access to family resources. You wanted to destroy this marriage to inherit? Congratulations. You've ensured you'll inherit nothing. Edmund fled. Actually turned and left without another word, pushing through the crowd to the door. Eliza watched him go and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just exhaustion. The gathering continued into evening. Guests examined evidence, spoke with tenants, explored the estate improvements. The narrative that emerged was unanimous. Whatever the marriage had started as, it had become something legitimate and impressive. Two people who'd built something real from unpromising beginnings. By the time the last guest departed the next day, Eliza felt wrung out. She stood on Thornfield's steps, watching carriages roll down the drive, while Adrian appeared beside her. We did it, he said quietly. We survived it, Eliza corrected. There's a difference. They stood in silence for a while, watching the moor stretch away under gray sky. The threat was over. Edmund's petition would be withdrawn. Their marriage was secure. So why did Eliza feel hollowed out instead of victorious? What happens now? She asked. Now we decide what we actually want. Adrian turned to face her. We fought for this marriage, defended it, made it legally unassailable. But we haven't actually addressed the question underneath all of that, which is, do we want to stay married? Not because it's politically necessary or legally convenient, because we choose it. Eliza looked at him, this man who'd sent her away and then fought beside her, who'd been cold and distant and then surprisingly vulnerable. I don't know, she said honestly. I know I respect you. I know we work well together. I know I don't hate you, which, given everything, is almost miraculous. But you don't love me. I don't know what I feel. It's all tangled up with anger and respect and exhaustion and something else I can't name. Eliza wrapped her arms around herself against the wind. What do you feel? Adrian was quiet for a long time. I feel like I've spent my entire adult life trying to control things, manage outcomes, protect people by keeping them at a distance, and all it got me was isolation and illness, and a marriage I nearly destroyed before it could begin. That's not an answer to my question. I know. He took a breath. I feel like you're the first person I've met who I can't manage or control or keep at a safe distance, and that terrifies me. But it also makes me want to try, actually try, to build something real with you. Not the political partnership we've demonstrated to London, something messier and more honest. Messier, Eliza repeated, that's romantic. I'm not good at romance. I'm good at strategy and planning and treating people like chess pieces, but I want to be better. For you. With you. Adrian held out his hand. If you'll give me the chance. Eliza looked at his outstretched hand. She could refuse. The marriage was secure now. She had wealth and property in her own right. She could live at Thornfield independently, build the life she'd started without the complication of trying to make a real marriage work with a man who'd already hurt her. Or she could take the risk, choose partnership not because it was necessary, but because it was possible. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm, solid, real. I'm not promising love, she said. I'm promising honesty and the willingness to try. That's all I have right now. That's more than enough, Adrian said. They walked back into Thornfield together, still holding hands, ready to figure out what came next. The house that had been a prison, then a refuge, now felt like something else. A beginning. Winter came early that year, blanketing the moor in snow by November. But Thornfield was ready. Repairs completed, supplies stockpiled, systems in place to weather the cold. Eliza and Adrian settled into a routine that looked nothing like a traditional marriage, but worked for them. They maintained separate bedrooms. Eliza wasn't ready for that intimacy yet, and Adrian didn't push. But they shared meals, worked together on estate business, spent evenings in the library arguing about everything from crop rotation to political philosophy. They learned each other slowly, carefully, like people discovering a language neither had spoken before. Some days were good. Adrian would make her laugh with dry observations about London society. Eliza would surprise him with insights about agricultural economics that revolutionized their planning. They'd sit by the fire and feel something close to contentment. Some days were hard. Old patterns would resurface, Adrian trying to make decisions without consulting her, Eliza shutting down when she felt controlled. They'd fight, sometimes bitterly, and then have to navigate making peace in a relationship that still felt fragile. This is harder than I expected, Eliza admitted one night after a particularly brutal argument about whether to expand the tenant farms. Did you expect it to be easy? Adrian asked. No, but I thought having successfully defended our marriage from legal destruction would make the actual marriage part simpler. That's adorably naive. Don't patronize me. I'm not. I'm just saying, we've handled the external threats. Now we're dealing with the internal ones. The parts of ourselves that are incompatible or damaged or just difficult. Adrian set down the book he'd been pretending to read. That takes longer than defeating Edmund. I don't know if I'm capable of what you want, Eliza said quietly. The devotion, the love, the whole happily married performance. I don't want a performance. I want what we have. Arguments and honesty and working together even when it's frustrating. That's more real than most marriages ever get. Even if it never becomes love? Adrian was quiet, considering. I think it already is love, just not the kind poets write about. It's the love of choosing someone every day, even when it's difficult, of trusting them with things that matter, of building something together that's worth the effort. Eliza felt tears threaten and blinked them back. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it. I'm terrible at romance. I know. It's one of your more endearing qualities. They smiled at each other across the library, and something that had been tight in Eliza's chest loosened slightly. Maybe this was enough. Maybe this messy, complicated partnership was exactly what they were supposed to build. Spring arrived with dramatic intensity, transforming the moor from brown desolation into shocking green. The estate improvements showed clear results, yields up across all tenant farms, families staying instead of leaving, new systems proving their worth. Thornfield was thriving. London had largely forgotten about them, which suited Eliza fine. They'd proven what needed proving. Now they could live without constant scrutiny, but not entirely without visibility. Adrian still had political obligations that occasionally required London visits. Eliza went with him now, playing the Duchess role when necessary, but always returning to Thornfield with relief. She'd learned to navigate society, but she'd never love it. On a warm May morning, Eliza found Adrian in the estate office reviewing harvest projections. He looked better than he had in London. The clean air and outdoor work had helped his recovery tremendously. The cough was gone, the gauntness replaced by something healthier. "We need to talk," she said. Adrian looked up, immediately wary. That tone never precedes good news. It's not bad news, it's just news. Eliza sat down, suddenly nervous. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air. Adrian went absolutely still, papers forgotten. "You're certain?" he asked finally. "The local physician confirmed it yesterday. About 2 months along." Eliza watched his face, trying to read his reaction. "I know this complicates things. We're still figuring out the marriage itself, and now—" "Eliza," Adrian interrupted her rambling. "This is good news. Complicated, yes, but good. You're sure? Because we never actually discussed children, never planned for this. We never plan for anything. We just deal with what comes and figure it out as we go." Adrian moved around the desk, kneeling beside her chair so they were eye level. "A child. Our child. That's extraordinary. It's terrifying. That too. But we're good at terrifying." He took her hand. "We survived winter at Thornfield. We defeated Edmund. We're rebuilding an estate and a marriage simultaneously. We can probably handle a baby." Eliza laughed despite her nerves. "Probably. I'm being realistic. Neither of us has any idea what we're doing." "That's not comforting. It's honest, which is what we promised each other." Adrian's thumb traced circles on her hand. "We'll figure it out. Together." The baby was born in January during a snowstorm that rivaled the one from Eliza's first winter. She labored for 18 hours while wind howled around Thornfield and Adrian paced holes in the library carpet. Mrs. Briggs and the midwife handled the actual birth with competent efficiency, barely tolerating Adrian's anxiety. When it was over, when Eliza lay exhausted in bed holding a tiny, screaming human, Adrian was allowed in. He stood in the doorway looking absolutely terrified. "It's a girl," Eliza said. "Come meet your daughter." He approached slowly, like the baby might explode. When he finally looked down at the small face, red and angry and very much alive, something in his expression cracked open. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's furious and loud. Very loud." But Eliza was smiling. "Do you want to hold her?" Adrian took the baby with the careful terror of someone handling nitroglycerin. She immediately stopped crying, apparently satisfied with the transfer. He stared at her like she was a miracle. "What should we name her?" he asked. Eliza had been thinking about this. "Catherine, after your friend who saved our marriage. Catherine will be insufferable about this." "Probably, but it's fitting." They named her Catherine Elizabeth Blackthorne. She was baptized in the small church in Morton with half the tenant families in attendance. Catherine Thorne traveled from London to be godmother and cried openly during the ceremony, ruining her carefully maintained reputation for emotional detachment. The baby changed everything and nothing. Eliza still managed the estate, just with an infant strapped to her back half the time. Adrian still handled political obligations, but rushed home faster now. They still argued and struggled and figured things out messily. But there was something else too, a depth to their partnership that hadn't existed before. Watching Adrian walk the moor with their daughter, explaining agricultural theory to an infant who couldn't possibly understand, finding Eliza asleep in the library with Catherine on her chest and a ledger fallen to the floor. The 1,000 small moments of shared parenthood that wove them together more thoroughly than any vow. "Do you think we're doing this right?" Eliza asked one evening. They were in the nursery, a room she'd had converted from one of the crumbling East Wing bedchambers, watching Catherine sleep. I have no idea, Adrian said, but she's alive and relatively happy, so we're probably not completely failing. That's a low bar. It's a realistic one. He put his arm around Eliza's shoulders, and she leaned into him naturally now, without thinking. We're giving her what we can: love, stability, honesty. The rest we'll figure out as we go. You say that about everything. It's worked so far. Eliza couldn't argue with that. Years passed. Catherine grew into a fierce, curious child who asked endless questions and climbed everything climbable. Thornfield Estate became a model of successful agricultural management, studied by other northern properties. The tenant families thrived, their farms profitable and sustainable. Eliza and Adrian's marriage evolved into something that couldn't be easily categorized. Not a romance exactly, though there was love. Not just a partnership, though they worked together brilliantly. Something uniquely theirs, built on respect and honesty and the willingness to keep choosing each other even when it was difficult. They fought sometimes, still struggled with old patterns. Adrian would occasionally slip into trying to control things. Eliza would sometimes shut down when she felt pressured. But they'd learned to recognize these patterns and interrupt them, to talk through problems instead of letting them fester. I never thanked you, Adrian said one night. They were in their usual evening position, the library, fire burning, Catherine asleep upstairs. For what? For not giving up. On Thornfield, on us, on everything. You could have walked away so many times. Probably should have. Eliza set down the book she'd been reading. Why would I walk away from something I built? Because it was hard. Because I made it harder than it needed to be. Everything worth having is hard. And yes, you made mistakes. So did I. She moved to sit beside him. But we fixed them. We're still fixing them. That's what matters. Adrian pulled her close, and she settled against him with the comfort of long practice. Do you ever regret it? The marriage, Thornfield, all of it? No. Do you? Never. Outside, wind swept across the moor, the same wind that had greeted Eliza on her first terrible night at Thornfield. But now it sounded different. Not harsh or threatening, just powerful. A force that shaped the landscape, made it what it was. Like everything else about this place, Eliza had learned to work with it rather than against it. Had learned that survival wasn't about avoiding storms, but about building something strong enough to weather them. She'd come to Thornfield as a discarded bride, exiled and forgotten. She'd become something else entirely. A landowner, a mother, a partner in a marriage that had been forged through adversity into something genuine. The girl who'd stood in that cold room feeling erased would barely recognize the woman she'd become. I love you, she said suddenly. The words surprised her, but they were true. Adrian's arms tightened around her. I love you too. Have for a while, actually. Why didn't you say anything? I was waiting for you to be ready to hear it. How did you know I was ready now? I didn't, but you said it first, so I figured it was safe. Eliza laughed, swatting his arm. Coward. Strategist. There's a difference. They sat together in the firelight, listening to the wind and the crackle of flames, comfortable in the silence that had taken years to earn. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The estate always had problems needing solving. Catherine would wake with questions or demands. Life would continue in its messy, complicated way. But tonight, Eliza was exactly where she wanted to be, in a house that had become home, with a man who'd become her partner, building a life that was nothing like what she'd imagined, but everything she'd needed. The moor stretched away outside, dark and vast and beautiful, and on land that had once been ruled by silence and abandonment, warmth and life had taken root, proving that even the harshest beginnings could grow into something worth keeping.